Hello and welcome to the Doof Book Club, our monthly live stream discussion of a book chosen by you, our listeners. My name is Matt Freeman,
And I'm Scott Daly.
and we're a couple of ideologically similar podcasters that nevertheless hate each other.
And I'll kill you. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Happy Friday. Happy New Year, and welcome. I hope you're all having a wonderful Friday evening. I'm sure we know a lot of folks in chat. I think we might know most of the people in chat this month. It didn't seem like it won the vote, but it didn't seem like there was a lot of excitement for this book, and maybe there's a reason for that. But if you happen to be joining us here for the very first time, welcome. We are Doof Media, and we make podcasts talking all about the stories that we love. We also arrange this here monthly book club. So say hello in chat and introduce yourself if you're new, or if we've seen you before, hello again. And that's how we'll do it. So Matt, why don't you explain what a book club is?
Each month, Scott and I select 5 books from a pool of books submitted to us by our wonderful Doof community. We put up a poll for all the supporters on Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia, and then we let the patrons vote on which they'd like us to talk about. The book with the most votes wins, and then we all read it.
And then we meet here on the last Friday of the month and spend a couple of hours discussing this book. We pull slides of some interesting or important moments and lead a discussion all about the story. Of course, the important part of that is that we are leading the discussion. We are not the only ones having the discussion. So if you are in chat and you don't know what's going on, say things, talk about the book, disagree with us, which you might on this one. Matt, what book are we talking about this month?
We're talking about the book Red Mars by Stanley Robinson, and the summary of the book is as follows. This is a long summary, by the way.
Sorry.
For eons, sandstorms have swept the desolate landscape. For centuries, Mars has beckoned humans to conquer its hostile climate. Now, in 2026, a group of 100 colonists is about to fulfill that destiny. John Boone, Maya Toitavna, Frank Chalmers, and Arkady Bogdanov lead a terraforming mission. For some, Mars will become a passion driving them to daring acts of courage and madness. For others, it offers an opportunity to strip the planet of its riches. For the genetic alchemists, it presents a chance to create a biomedical miracle, a breakthrough that could change all we know about life and death. The colonists orbit giant satellite mirrors to reflect light to the surface. Black dust sprinkled on the polar caps will capture warmth. Massive tunnels, kilometers deep, will be drilled into the mantle to create stupendous vents of hot gases. Against this backdrop of epic upheaval, rivalries, loves, and friendships will form and fall to pieces. For there are those who will fight to the death to prevent Mars from ever being changed.
Dun dun dun. Man, that sounds like an exciting, action-packed novel. So, Matt, why don't you tell me what you thought of Red Mars? Had you ever read this book before, and what did you think of it? And while Matt is doing that, those of you in chat, I guess we should say hello. We see our usual crowd here. We see John, Bipolaron, David, Miss Evil Doom. How are you folks doing? Hope you guys had a good holiday. And I see Not as well.
Yeah. Welcome, everyone. Great to see y'all. So what did I think about this book? This was a very unusual book.
Uh-huh.
Part of me felt like this is like the anti-book, or perhaps I should say the anti-novel, where it's doing some very interesting structural things, some very interesting plot things, and there's a ton going on in it. There's a lot of stuff to like here, and but it's all within sort of an almost intentionally frustrating plot. We're going to get into this at length, but I think my first cut is like the book was more intended to be like, how would this actually go, more or less?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the characters just kind of behave the way human beings behave, with all of their frustration and contradiction and mulish stupidity and almost at every possible turn, it like keeps you from feeling like there's characters that you want to root for,
Yeah.
which makes it more difficult to read in some regards, I would say. But very, like, a lot of interesting stuff, and I think this is going to be an interesting conversation.
Yeah. I struggled with this book a whole lot, and I think it's for a lot of the same reasons you did. I think there are tons of ideas here, and like I think this is going to be a great conversation because really diving into these ideas is going to be really interesting. I also think like if you're super into like planetary geology, this is a great book for you because it's very clear to me that Kim Stanley Robinson researched the shit out of Mars before he wrote this book, or he was just like really good at making up names for every geological feature on the planet, which I don't think so. I think a lot of these we've looked at with a big enough telescope to name a bunch of them, and he throws a lot of names of calderas and mountain ranges and valleys and there's pages after pages after pages of characters just roving across the Martian landscape talking about different things they see. And like the first time I saw that, I was kind of entranced by the beauty of it. And then by page like 500 of it, I was like really starting to just skip ahead a little bit. It's like, okay, I get this is another 3 pages of like how cool the Martian geology is. Let's move on a little bit.
Yeah, that's. I mean, what's funny is I have like a massive background in like hydrology and geology and all this stuff. So like I not only understood but appreciated all of that stuff. Although I might have some quibbles about how realistic it is that you could puncture this aquifer and have it just like flood the entire surface. I'm not quite sure if that would happen. Translation: I don't think that would happen. But it was interesting to me, but only only to a certain extent. I think a lot of the stuff that was most interesting to me was like the sociology. And part of me was gonna, for a second there, I was gonna say like the politics, but actually, the politics are intentionally just like very simple, straightforward, what you would expect to happen due to people following their incentives.
Yeah.
The sociology of how the characters are reacting to their situations and like the stories they're telling themselves about who they are and why they are, why they're doing what they're doing. And, half the characters, maybe all the characters in this novel are some sort of like ideologue, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Of wildly different stripes. I think that's part of the thematics is that we have a bunch of scientists who were nominally picked because they would be good scientists, and it turned out that they were all crazy people. Which I think that's totally an intentional, thing that the book is doing, right? The book even talks about that.
Yeah, and we definitely pulled a slide on that. Yeah, I mean, I think I like what John is saying, that this is a holistic approach to science, and it's not just science too. I mean, it's very clear to me that Kim Stanley Robinson had some things he wanted to say or explore about sociology. You're absolutely right. Humanity. And he used this idea to really explore every single facet of who we are and why we behave the way we behave and the one possible end result. I think it's funny that you kind of avoided saying the word political, because I do think like as much as politics plays an important role in this book, it's not like the type of book where I'm like, okay, I know where Kim Robinson like stands on X issue, Y issue, like I think it's very just like, it's very kind of not politically indifferent, but not detailed. It's more focused on what in those politics motivates an individual to decide to do X or Y.
Yeah. What's funny is when the book was starting, I felt really sure that like with the name Red Mars and the fact that half of the crew was Russians, I was like, okay, this is going to be about communism.
Yeah, and it's really not.
It's not at all.
I mean, it's there. Like communism exists, just like every other government organization or economic system exists. Yeah, it all exists.
It's just the idea is like we just need we need a system that suits the ecological and physical realities of the life that we live, and and that's none of the existing systems from Earth.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's something we can spend some time on during the course of this conversation, because Not is saying, that he thinks the system doesn't work, and I agree with that, but I wonder, like, I think this is a kind of pessimistic book in that regard. I'm not sure if what he's saying is that any system could ever work, ever. Like a lot of this to me is like we look at Mars as this place for a fresh start, and it will invariably just become as destructive and bad and awful as existence on our planet or anywhere else could possibly be. Like there's so many different moments in this book where we go into different ecosystems. Like we start with Ares and we just have 100 people just on a ship, and they don't really even know each other. They're supposed to all be like rational, intelligent people, and they end up dividing into factions and hating each other and fighting. Then they get to Mars and they just do that to the 100th degree, you know? So like it feels like to me the message of this book is, yeah, we're just kind of fucked.
Yeah. Yeah, it's basically a tragedy about human nature and how we're doomed by our own nature. So I mean, before we get into slides, I guess like the my biggest kind of takeaway, like the thing that I will remember walking away from this book, is the character of Frank specifically, and how Frank, well, he's this guy who's like constantly both inwardly and outwardly raving about how people are being irrational and they're not being intelligent and pursuing their own best interests, and um, just everyone around him is idiots. And he's the guy who got so jealous of his best friend that he killed him,
Mm-hmm.
and probably doomed them all, because I got the strong sense that like the pair of Frank and John was the only thing that was like keeping things functioning. Like I think you pointed out like the charisma of John with the realpolitik of Frank kept things going. But and like he's a perfect example of like he sowed his own doom,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because he's an idiot like everyone else, right?
Everyone in this book is an idiot. Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, that's an interesting thing. Like, there are very few characters in this story that I liked. I like, and I think we're gonna talk a lot about as we get into the slides. Like the way the book does a very good job of like convincing you that a character is a certain way, and then you get to see them from another person's perspective. I think Maya is the greatest example of this, and we're gonna have a lot to talk about her. Like we see from her perspective the time on Ares, and we understand that there's obviously a love triangle going on between her and Frank and John, and but she seems like a relatively stable, you know, normal, like just average human being, right? And then when we see her from Nadia's perspective, oh my god, she's the most annoying human being on the surface of Mars.
Yeah.
And it's like it's incredible how fast that switches.
And then, I think for that matter, both Frank and John sort of perceive her differently than Nadia perceives her. It's
Right.
like everyone sees everyone else through a glass darkly. Like John is this guy who everybody loves, but you get the sense nobody knows him
Yeah, yeah.
because he's the Neil Armstrong. He's larger than life. Um, and I think maybe the part that I enjoyed in the strictest sense the most was John's POV, which is funny because you knew he was going to die horribly the whole time. So
Yeah, I mean, I want to talk about that structural choice. I think, like overall, my thoughts on this book are: I think this is such an ambitious idea. I'm really interested in it. I'm really like I'm already having fun talking about it. It was a struggle to read. It was a real struggle for me to read this book. This is like I know I've said this before, but this time I truly mean it. This was the closest I got to just not finishing a book in time for book club. Like I yesterday, my wife comes home and she's like she sees me reading and she's like, "How you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, 180 more pages to go yesterday night." And I was like, I don't know and I stayed up till like 2 in the morning and I got down to like 30 pages to go. And then I woke up first thing this morning. Before I started working, I read them so I could finish with time to do the slides and everything. But yeah, I mean, I really struggle there. I mean, it's weird because it goes in fits and starts where like for a sequence of 25 to 30 pages I would be absolutely riveted. I would be like
mhm.
I'm so into what the book is talking about and I can see what Stanley's doing and I'm really into it. And then there would just be this like 40-page section where Frank is just like driving around on the surface of Mars and I'm just like
Yeah, talking about Nietzsche.
yeah, and I'm
Um,
just like if you tell me one more geological feature of this planet, I'm leaving. But like, okay, like, what the fuck is a mohole? I don't know
I,
what that is. What
what's
is it?
funny is I didn't I just from context I was like, I guess they're digging just really deep tunnels for some reason, and I had to read Wikipedia to learn that like the reason is that they want to like allow the heat of the deep parts of Mars to percolate up,
Yeah.
to the surface.
If they said that in the book, I missed it because I was just like they kept using this word and using it as if I'm supposed to know what it is. And I looked it up as if it's like a common term, and it didn't seem like it was.
Yeah, I didn't. I don't know. There are a few things. Yeah, there are a few things like that where instead of explaining it's show don't tell.
Yeah, and I'm like generally I'm okay with that, right? I don't want like a character to have to stop what they're doing in their narrative to like walk me through the basics of geology. Like I'm fine with that. There's so many ideas and so many complicated pieces of science going here that I get. But that was just one thing that stood out to me because like I felt like in John's section they said mohole like 37 times, and in my head I'm just like, okay, I'm just guessing it's like a big hole. But then like they kept talking about people down there, and I was like, do people live in it? Is it a living hole?
There are a few times where I also got a bit sniped because I was like, wait a minute, did he do that right? Because like for example, when the giant truck falls and it's gonna fall on John,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, it and he's like, it wasn't such a big deal because it was falling at only Martian gravity. And then I was like, well, it would if it's falling for a long time, it's gonna fall really, really fast. And then before I can finish that thought, he's like, that it was okay because it reached terminal velocity. And I was like, there's like no atmosphere there. So terminal velocity is going to be way faster than Earth terminal velocity.
No,
So
because the algae, there was a little atmosphere already.
it's very, very little. But like the point is like, it was the kind of thing where I'd stop and be like, wait a minute, is this all bullshit? Are you just making all this up as you go? Because like,
I don't think he was though. I
maybe this is
really
a
don't
pet
think
peeve
he
or
was.
something, but like if you're gonna do hard sci-fi, you can't make mistakes like that. I don't know if this is actually a mistake or if I misunderstood something, but there were a few things like that that bothered me, honestly. A lot of it related to the geology too.
I had a very hard time visualizing a lot of the stuff in this book. Like, I don't know what it is, but like at any of the settlements, I think the only settlement I got a really clear image of was the one in the very beginning, which is technically midway through the book. I forget what the name of the place is, but where it's a big curtain, big dome thing. I but for everything else I had a lot of trouble. The only other thing I had clear ability to visualize was Olympus Mons because I've seen pictures of that before. So every time they said Olympus Mons, I was like, got it, we're there. But everything else I had a lot of, like the whole scene where the truck falls on him, I had a really hard time visualizing what was happening there.
And that's sort of an in media res thing too, so that makes sense. The Okay, so but if he says if the terminal velocity was right, then doesn't John say something about like he wasn't worried because the terminal velocity was lower? Maybe I just misunderstood. Whatever. Terminal velocity on Mars is about 1,000 kilometers per hour, so you would be in trouble, is what I'm trying to say.
So what? Just so I'm understanding, that section, what happens is he's at the bottom of the mohole, and a truck falls in the hole, right?
Yes.
That's what happened. Okay.
Yes.
Because when I first read it, I thought that a truck just like fell over, and I was very confused as to why it was taking so long to fall. And then I had to reread it and be like, wait, what?
Yeah, well, it was it was like blown off of something, and then it was falling. Anyway.
Yeah, well, it was sabotaged by someone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, why don't we get into the the slides and then we can.
Yes.
But I mean, I think overall, I enjoyed parts of this book. There's the ending is so cool when like the fucking cable, the space elevator falls down. That's such a cool scene, and then they blow up the moon, and then we go back to another 50 pages of people just traveling across the surface of Mars again in cars this time instead of planes. And I'm like, ugh. But anyway, let's move into the story
Let's
itself.
do it. All right. So as always, we begin with the opening of the book. Mars was empty before we came. That's not to say that nothing had ever happened. The planet had accreted, melted, roiled, and cooled, leaving a surface scarred by enormous geological features, craters, canyons, volcanoes. But all of that happened in mineral unconsciousness and unobserved. There were no witnesses, except for us looking from the planet next door, and that only in the last moment of its long history. We are all the consciousness that Mars has ever had. Now, everybody knows the history of Mars in the human mind. how for all the generations of prehistory, it was one of the chief lights in the sky because of its redness and fluctuating intensity, and the way it stalled in its wandering course through the stars, and sometimes even reversed direction. It seemed to be saying something with all that. So perhaps it is not surprising that all the oldest names for Mars have a peculiar weight on the tongue. Nergal, Mangala, Al- Al- Alkaku, Harmakis. They sound as if they were even older than the ancient languages we find them in, as if they were fossil words from the Ice Age or before. Yes, for thousands of years, Mars was a sacred power in human affairs, and its color made it a dangerous power, representing blood, anger, war, and the heart. Then the first telescopes gave us a closer look, and we saw the little orange disk with its white poles and dark patches spreading and shrinking as the long seasons passed. No improvement in the technology of the telescopes ever gave us much more than that, but the best earthbound images gave Lowell enough blurs to inspire a story, and the story we all know of a dying world and a heroic people desperately building canals to hold off the final deadly encroachment of the desert. It was a great story. But then Mariner and Viking sent back their photos, and everything changed. Our knowledge of Mars expanded by magnitudes. We literally knew millions of times more about this planet than we had before, and there before us flew a new world, a world unsuspected.
I really like the way Kim Stanley Robinson writes individual passages sometimes. Like I loved this opening.
Mm-hmm.
I think someone in chat had already said it, but the an opening line like Mars was empty before we came is just it's just perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And then I love the last line of the section as well. And there before us flew a new world, a world unsuspected. That's so good. That's
Yeah.
so good.
It's a beautiful and kind of poetical way of writing where
Hmm.
he's
Hmm.
sort of he just takes these opportunities to sort of pontificate in a very beautiful way where
Yeah.
there's nobody having these thoughts, right? There's no point of view thinking, the ancient names of Mars have a particular weight as if they were fossils from ancient languages. It's like, no, that's just the
Yeah.
narrator talking to you about these ideas, which happens a lot throughout the story, I think.
Yeah.
Very often, of course, insights are situated from the perspective of a particular character, but I don't think they always are by any
No.
means.
I really also love we are all the consciousness that Mars has ever had, as if like to firmly establish and make it clear that everything that's going to happen on this planet over the course of this book, it's all our fault, all of it, every little bit of it, everything that happens on this planet is us because
Yeah.
there was nothing there before we came, and so it's all us. There's no blaming of the universe or the planet. Like this place was empty, we came to it, and we fucked each other up.
I have to correct myself because Kirk just points out that when you turn the page, it's revealed that this is John Boone's speech. Um, so it's not the narrator's voice speaking directly to you. But in any case,
Mm.
I think that he finds a way to kind of inject a lot of this poetical, just talking about how awesome Mars is into all the perspectives of all his characters.
Yeah, and I love, we learn very quickly from Frank how he immediately like here's the thing about Frank. He ideologically, I think him and John are very similar, but like Frank is the type of person that never says what he means because he just is constantly playing the politics game. And John is a person that is almost always saying what he means because that's just the type of person he is. So like Frank hears John say these things and is like, bullshit. That's not true. All of it. It's bullshit. And no, like John believes every bit of this. He really does. It's God. Their interaction. These two characters are really fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, I can't wait to talk about them more.
Yeah. Speaking of which, let's move on to the next slide. Unless you had something you wanted to talk
No,
about on that one.
let's go.
All right, so here is our opening of our book, and we're kind of learning about those two protagonists that we were just talking about. And we see here, we meet Frank in the middle of manipulating someone else to assassinate his good buddy. How do you like the speeches? He asked, looking into the black mud at the bottom of his demitasse. John Boone is the same as ever, old Zek replied. The others laughed angrily. When he says we will make an indigenous Martian culture, he only means some of the Terran cultures here will be promoted and others attacked. Those perceived as regressive will be singled out for destruction. It is a form of attackerism. He thinks everyone on Mars should become American, said a man named Nejum. Why not? Zek said, smiling. It's already happened on Earth. No, Frank said. You shouldn't misunderstand Boone. People say he's self-absorbed, but He is self-absorbed, Nejum cried. He lives in a hall of mirrors. He thinks that we have come to Mars to establish a good old American superculture, and that everyone will agree to it because it is the John Boone plan. Zek said, he does not understand that other people have other opinions. It's not that, Frank says. It's just that he knows they don't make as much sense as his. They laughed at that, but the younger men's hoots had a bitter edge. They all believed that before their arrival, Boone had argued in secret against UN approval for Arab settlements. Frank encouraged this belief, which was almost true. John disliked any ideology that might get in his way. He wanted the slate as blank as possible in everyone who came up. The Arabs, however, believed that John disliked them in particular. Young Salim El-Hayil opened his mouth to speak, and Frank gave him a swift warning glance. Salim froze, then pursed his mouth angrily. Frank said, well, he's not as bad as all that, although to tell the truth, I've heard him say it would be better if the Americans and Russians had been able to claim the planet when they arrived, like the explorers in the old days. Their laughter was brief and grim. Salim's shoulders hunched as if struck. Frank shrugged and smiled, spread his hands wide. But it's pointless. I mean, what can he do? Old Zek lifted his eyebrows. Opinions vary on that.
So yeah, as you say, he's pretty good at manipulation. No word that leaves his mouth is ever what he actually believes. I mean, what's funny is, isn't Frank one of the most like anti-religious people in the whole bunch? I guess John is also anti-religious, but he's basically just telling them what they want to hear. You know, he doesn't have any.
Yeah.
He doesn't really support them, actually. It's just just convenient because he can use them as a power base to manipulate.
Yeah, well, and Frank is also a literal representative of the American government here. So, like, just to be sitting here with these people complaining about how John wants an American superculture, and Frank is sitting right there as a literal representation of America, I think is very kind of ironic. But yeah, I mean, like, that's his game. That's the Frank game. He just kind of he lets people believe what he thinks, and he kind of pushes and forces them into thinking certain things, and without ever, coming out and doing it himself. I think, one of the most shocking things about this moment, I think, is not just that he kind of arranges for John's assassination, which at this point in the book, we don't understand why that's as big of a deal as it is, because we barely know these characters yet, but like over the course of the book we'll see like how huge that was that he did that. But like that he starts the riots too, like he grabs the stones and just starts like chucking stones. Like it's God, this fucking, I hate this guy. I hate him.
He's really fascinating because he's this combination of like evil vizier schemer, and also he just sometimes will become completely unhinged and like not points out, like he's a member of the presidential cabinet, and then sometimes he'll just go off and drive around the desert for a couple of years without touching base. And
his people will cover for him for 2 years.
He's really fascinating.
I'm sorry, he's in a meeting for 2 years.
He's doing important work.
Mm-hmm. He's a fascinating character. My gosh, I don't think I've ever really seen a character quite like Frank before.
Yeah, that's one of the ways in which this is like an anti-book, because if you were to try to pick a protagonist for this book, first of all, that would be quite a challenge, because I think you'd have kind of at least a tie between John and Frank, and then potentially also Maya and Nadia would be competing for that seat as well, which is fine. Not all books have one singular protagonist. I think there's a chance though that like none of them are because none of them really have the classic arc, right? This is more just like a bunch of stuff that happens to these people.
Under the traditional definition of protagonist, I think that it kind of falls apart in this book, because there's not very much in this book that is traditional narrative structure, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I forget the name of the structure for this, but like I guess a flat arc is the structure, because Frank very explicitly never changes. He dies saying, "Go, you idiots," which is like the most Frank thing to say, right?
It's such a Frank thing to say. Yeah,
that's like he hasn't learned anything. He hasn't changed. No learning, no hugging, and that's it. And that's almost every character. I think Anne is the only person who changes even slightly.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think if Nadia changes. I mean, gosh, Nadia is such a I mean, she definitely does change, but I don't know, not like in an arc kind of way.
I think, I mean, again, I think this is intentional. Like these characters are all like, we basically cover like 50 years of their lives,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And they change remarkably little over the course of 50 years. And like their material circumstances change, all kinds of things happen to them,
yeah,
but like we don't get that sort of cathartic character change. And I do think that's intentional. I think this is like about how impossible it is for people to change and about how we're kind of doomed by our own nature.
sure, sure, yeah. All right. I guess before we move on, I just want to say, like, I do find the choice here really interesting. The overarching structure of the book, that we start at this moment, we start um, witnessing these characters we don't really know yet and haven't really met fully yet, and we see one of them get assassinated and the other directly responsible for it, and then we go back and so it's kind of this in media res start, and then we go back in time and learn the context of who all these people were and how they got to this position. And I really think that's an interesting choice, because I think like every moment with John Boone is now colored in a different light, because he ends up dead. And so like he's an idealist in a lot of ways, and like you're kind of just seeing, no, you're it's way more dangerous than you think. But like when he goes on his detective mission, it's like, I think someone might be trying to kill me. You're like, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
At least one somebody, possibly multiple somebodies. That's
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, he's always totally naive to like the number of people who have a vested interest in this, and he is in their way, you know.
Mm-hmm. Good question, John. Is this a prologue? Um, no. Here's what I'm gonna say. Every single one of the sections of the story is its own independent book, and the italicized little bit at the beginning, like we just read in the last slide, is the prologue of that section. So, um, because it's only like a page and a half long normally, I don't hate it, because I'm fine. If like you want to make your prologue like 3 sentences, I'm in. But I don't think this is the prologue, because this is part of the story proper. Like prologue is supposed to be before the story. Um, so no, I think this is right in the story. We just start in the middle and then go back.
Yeah. Right. I mean, just, I'm repeating myself now, but these are the things that make me just keep thinking like he was really trying to be avant-garde with his structuring of every element of the story, because he
Yeah.
basically tells us one of the most climactic decision points of the story immediately,
Hmm.
and then jumps back an enormous amount of time to talk about how we get there. And then when we get there, we actually just kind of blow past that moment, you
Yeah,
know?
we don't. That's the thing, is we don't like. It's not as if every moment from this point of the story on is building up to that moment of John's assassination, because it's
Yeah.
not really.
It's in fact, it's kind of blinking you miss it, because I distinctly remember being like, okay, wait a second. Okay, so John's dead now.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so wait, did he just die, or like what? It was not something that was even signposted explicitly.
Hmm. Hmm.
It was like, oh, like you realize in context that he's dead now. So
That's the fascinating thing about this book. I think uh, the author is definitely trying to summon up emotion in you, but I think the parts that he wants you to feel emotional about are like the beautiful landscapes, or the beauty of Mars, or like the overarching tragedy of this. Like I feel like the individual character moments are he doesn't, it's not that he doesn't care. That's the wrong phrase. I was going to say that, but that's wrong. It's that he just tells it so matter of factly that it's just kind of reporting on the news. Like it's not like John died and this is a tragedy. It's just like, and then John was dead. Maya was very sad about it, and
yeah,
and then we just kind of move on. And I think it's really interesting, because that happens quite a lot. And like I think the elevator cable falling has more tragedy to it than the death of John, and not because it kills people along the way. It's because of what it falling stands for
yeah,
ideologically in the story.
yeah. I mean, the ending of this book is so depressing. I mean, we'll get there. There's some interesting back and forth happening in the chat, as a couple people pointed out that Nadia also seems to have a bit of character change, where she comes to appreciate the natural beauty of Mars, whereas she had only seen it as something to be engineered. And in contrast, Anne, the one who always appreciated the natural beauty, comes to kind of appreciate her fellow humans more. And I think both of them kind of cross, or maybe meet in the middle. I think that's
Yeah,
valid.
I wasn't in
Um,
love with the suddenness of Anne's character change though.
yeah,
I feel like she's just sitting in a car sad and then suddenly goes, "Oh, I'm being an asshole. Okay,
yeah,
I'll
and
probably try not to do that anymore."
and she'd been on this planet for like 50 years. I mean, it's a hugely traumatic thing that happens. So you
Oh,
can kind
sure,
of,
sure.
but like I get what you mean though.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
she lost Peter, who's a character we cared so much about.
yeah, Peter. Um,
Hey, Colin, what's up? Happy New Year.
so shall I move on to the next slide?
Yeah. Before you go though, Kirk says there is a slight detail at the end of John's section about he is about to visit
No.
the city for so like I think the celebration on Olympus Mons when the asteroid air breaks by is like maybe a couple weeks before the opening of this book. Maybe I'm
Mm.
not. Like time is relative, especially when it's
Well,
Martian time. Who knows?
and it's really hard to keep track of the time in the story because these characters eventually become immortal,
Yeah.
and so there's no key. Like everybody just kind of looks. Every once in a while, somebody will be described as having white hair, but it's like, yeah, but it's almost like it goes out of its way to tell us what they look like in terms of aging because they're like 100 years old or 80
Yeah.
years old or
Yeah.
whatever, and they have their treatments. So what do they look like? They're 35? Do they look like they're 60? It's kind of intentionally not clear.
Yeah. I,
Anyway,
I love I love the casualness. Like that's so much of this book is casual that like, oh yeah, we've just invented a thing that keeps your cells as if they're only 10 years old. It's just no problem.
oh
Oh, yeah.
yes, that reminds me. Is I'm going to talk about it now. Maybe there's a better slide for this somewhere later. But like at a certain point, I got this strong vibe that this was tying into the mythos of like the gods, and I kept thinking about the Olympians because you've got this small cadre of immortals who have incredible, literally godlike power to reshape the face of a planet. They constantly bicker amongst themselves and have love triangles and do ridiculous things and kill each other out of jealousy, which is all super super Olympian godlike behavior. And fundamentally, it's like they're stand-ins for uh, our own flaws as creatures. They're these people are a way of telling stories about the flaws in human nature. So I just kept thinking about how this was like
Oh,
Olympian.
they're like 100% the Greek pantheon. Yeah, yeah, like totally. Like they're bickering. They're just like everything. Yes, 100%.
Yeah, I think Frank even refers to Hiroko's Persephone routine at some point, I
Yeah,
believe.
yeah. Like there's constant. I think one of the characters directly says like, "Oh, we're basically like gods now." No,
Mm,
we're
yeah.
actually better than that. Yeah, like oh yeah. And I think that to Kirk's point, like a lot of these characters are stand-ins for, you know, ideological movements, for belief systems, for forces as Kirk puts it. So like that ties in perfectly with them being Greek gods, which also stood in for a particular force
Mm.
or idea or belief or structure. Yeah, like it's yeah, for sure.
I bet you could map them one to one. Like I bet Nadia could be Hephaestus because she ends up with a physical disability.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, probably probably who's I'm trying
I'm
to figure
trying
out
I'm
who's Zeus. Is Zeus John or Frank? I don't know.
I feel like I don't know because the problem with mapping them one to one is that there's so much inconsistency is with the behavior. Like everyone wrote about the Greek gods and wrote differently, but
That's
like
true.
I mean, you could do a Hades Zeus thing, you could do a Poseidon Zeus thing with John and Frank. You know, Zeus basically fought with everyone at some point, so
Yeah.
it's yeah.
Well, I don't know. If anything obvious jumped out, I wanted to go there, but yeah.
Yeah, Maya's Aphrodite. Yeah. My gosh, their relationship. That's whew. Okay. Anyway, let's move on to our next slide, Matt. This is we've jumped back in time, and now all of our Greek gods are hanging out on their Greek god spaceship.
All right. Now Nadia looked around and said, putting the Russian and American living quarters in different Tauruses was a horrible idea. We work with them during the day, but we spend most of our time here with the same old faces. It only reinforces the other divisions between us. Maybe we should offer to exchange half the rooms. Arkady, wolfing down coffee rolls, leaned over from the next table. It's not enough, he said, as if he had been part of their conversation all along. His red beard, growing wilder every day, was dusted with crumbs. We should declare every other Sunday to be moving day, and have everyone shift quarters on a random basis. People would get to know more of the others, and there would be fewer clicks, and the notion of ownership of the rooms would be reduced. But I like owning a room, Nadia said. Arkady downed another roll, grinned at her as he chewed. It was a miracle he had passed the selection committee. But Maya brought up the subject with the Americans, and though no one liked Arkady's plan, a single exchange of half the apartments struck them as a good idea. After some consulting and discussion, the move was arranged. They did it on a Sunday morning, and after that, breakfast was a little more cosmopolitan. Mornings in the D dining hall now included Frank Chalmers and John Boone, and also Sax Russell, Mary Dunkel, Janet Blyleven, Raya Jimenez, Michelle Duval, and Ursula Cole.
So here's our main players here. I love this because it firmly establishes this idea that, like, I really do think a lot of these characters, terrible or not, went into this whole thing with the best intention. And I love this innocent start, you know, like these two groups of peoples from different cultures, from different ways of life. That I think this book was written in the early 90s, so this is still, you know, very recently post fall of Soviet Union, right? So like we're just at the point now where Americans and Russias could even be considered to cooperate on things again, and so this idea that, like, hey, we should be intermingling, we should be intermixing, we should not try to silo ourselves and be the Americans and the Russians, we should be the Martians. I love the purity and innocence of that central idea, and I love the way in which it breaks down almost immediately. And I think that's the incredible thing, is like you can look at their time on the Ares as a microcosm of everything else that happens once they get to the planet. The only reason they don't destroy each other on the Ares is because there's just limited resources and limited time. You know, given enough time, things would continue to segment and destroy, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I almost forget about this part of the book because it feels so different from the Mars stuff, but like the element where they spend this huge amount of time on this ship and they're all kind of going crazy, and every just like the way he tracks the mental decay of the individuals and their interrelationships is just it's such a great part of the story. Actually, in some ways it might be my favorite part of the story, actually.
Yeah, I agree. I really liked this opening part. I think it's really interesting what happens when you introduce, you know, 100 people to a closed system like this and just make it so they're just interacting with nothing but each other. Like, we kind of are reduced to our more childish instincts. Like, I love the comparison to them. Like, it feels like high school. They feel like they're acting like teenagers. And these are 50-year-old, you know, brilliant scientists, right? Like, this is, yeah. I love the idea of making them scientists allows us to get into all the details of the science and the engineering and all the cool stuff. But it also does this thing where, like, everyone makes the assumption, and maybe this is a great transition to our next slide, but everyone, like, makes the assumption that they're these incredibly rational, thoughtful, you know, smart human beings that are not going to make the emotional decision, that are not going to act rashly, that are not going to act on anger and things like this. And no, like, turns out folks, scientists, humans, they're human beings. Yeah.
Right. And if you take any one person and you put them in a completely wildly alien context,
yeah,
they are no longer the same person fundamentally. I think that's a fundamental theme of the story.
Yeah. And I think one of the ways we're almost immediately introduced to this is this concept right here, where everyone's talking about the multiphasic personality inventory test that they had to take. God damn it, Ark, John said. First those crazy problem runs, and now this. You're a wild man. You really are. How in the hell did you get them to let you on board this ship anyway? Exactly my question, thought Maya. I lied, Arcady said. Everyone laughed. Even Frank looked surprised. But of course I lied, Arcady shouted, a big upside-down grin splitting in his red beard. How else could I get here? I want to go to Mars to do what I want, and the selection committee wanted people to go and do what they were told. You know that. He pointed down at them and shouted, You all lied. You know you did. Frank was laughing harder than ever. Sachs wore his usual Buster Keaton, but he raised a finger and said, "The revised Minnesota multiphasic personality inventory," and a great jeer went up from them all. They had all been required to take this exam. It was the world's most widely used psychological test, and well regarded by experts. Respondents agreed or disagreed to 556 statements, and a profile was formed from their replies. But the judgments concerning what the answers meant were based on the earlier responses of a sample group of 2,600 white, married, middle-class Minnesota farmers of the 1930s. Despite all subsequent revisions, the pervading bias created by the nature of the first test group was still so deeply ingrained in the test, or at least some of them thought so. "Minnesota," Arcady shouted, rolling his eyes. "Farmers! Farmers from Minnesota! I tell you this now, I lied in every answer to every single question. I answered exactly opposite to what I really felt, and this is what allowed me to score as normal." Wild cheers greeted this announcement. "Hell," John said, "I'm from Minnesota and I had to lie." And I had to lie. More cheers. Frank, Maya noted, was crimson with hilarity, incapable of speech, hands clutching his stomach, nodding, giggling, helpless to stop himself. She had never seen him laugh like that. Sachs said, "The test made you lie." "What? Not you?" Arcady demanded. "Didn't you lie too?" "Well, no," Sachs said, blinking as if the concept had never occurred to him before. "I told the truth to every question."
That's fantastic.
Crossland says, as a Minnesotan, "Yep."
This is one of the more human moments from Frank also.
Yeah, just this. He's allowing himself to be emotional and like I feel like this is genuine from him, where we very rarely see genuine Frank.
Right. Well, I feel like he feels camaraderie for the first time because he's like, "Oh, thank God, everyone else around me is also liars."
Yeah.
Also, I guess this is a good opportunity to talk about Arkady, which everyone has mentioned he's the most likable. I related to him the most too, because like I would be the one to suggest that, everyone rotate bunks every 2 weeks, and I would be the one trying to make people do ridiculously challenging problem runs and stuff. Like that's totally my bag. I'm like, I literally create fake social experiments all the time.
I love Arkady, but remind me to never be on a spaceship with you.
Yeah. Well, sorry, Scott. I've booked us a flight anyway.
I like having my own bunk. I like my own bunk. I'm with Nadia on this.
We'll see what we can do, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Sachs is the one sane man, says John in the chat. Sachs is a very fun character. Sachs is a fascinating character. He reminds me the most of this a lot of scientists that I used to actually know. So.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. Kirk is kind of saying maybe he's not the most rational. Maybe he's just pretending to. Like, so the question is he lying when he says I told the truth to every question here?
I mean, I think my understanding of his character is that at this point in time, he is exactly as he appears to be. But I think that when they get to Mars, something about him gradually cracks, and he becomes more ideological.
Yeah.
I mean, in a sense, everyone is ideological. Like, that's one idea the book is putting forth, is
Sure.
like, just because even his desire to see Mars terraformed is a kind of ideology. But he becomes, more sympathetic to what Hiroko's doing. And at this point, though, I like Kirk's answer that he's lying to himself more than anything.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I do appreciate. There's a moment really late in the book where they're looking at as Mars is being completely flooded and destroyed, where he's got this moment where he's looking at the data and he just kind of says, I wouldn't have done it like this. Like there's this constant refrain as things escalate and things get destroyed that people are like, oh, I bet Sachs is really into this because it's going to really help with this terraforming project. And I love that the author took time to just have this brief moment where like it gets to a point where even Sachs is like, no, this is not the way I wanted it, because he loves Mars to some extent. It's a different kind of love than Anne has, or than that Frank and John and Arcady and all these other people have. But in his own way, he loves this place as well.
Yeah, definitely. All right, shall we move on?
Colin says Arcady seems like a lots of disaster waiting to happen. Yeah, I mean that's very true. Just like Matt.
I relate to him. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. All right, so next we have the perspective of Nadia, and we begin to learn about the cool tech that they have on Mars. The walkers were designed for the Martian surface and were not pressurized like spacesuits, but were rather made of an elastic mesh which held in the body at about the same pressure that the Terran atmosphere would have. This prevented the severe expansion bruising that would result if skin were exposed to Mars's minimal atmosphere. But it gave the wearer a lot more freedom of movement than a pressurized spacesuit would have. Walkers also had a very significant advantage of being fail operational. Only the hard helmet was airtight, so if you ripped a hole at the knee or elbow, you would have a badly bruised and frozen patch of skin, but would not suffocate and die within minutes. Getting into a walker, however, was a workout in itself. Nadia wriggled the pants over her long underwear, then got in the jacket and zipped the two sections of the suit together. After that, she jammed into big thermal boots and locked their top rings to the suit's ankle rings, pulled on gloves and locked the wrist rings, put on a fairly standard hard helmet and locked it on the suit's neck ring, then shouldered into an air tank backpack and linked its air tubes to her helmet. She breathed hard a few times, tasting the cool oxygen nitrogen in her face. The walker's wrist pad indicated that all the seals were good, and she followed John and Samantha into the lock. They closed the inner door, the air was sucked back into containers, and John unlocked the outer door. The three of them stepped outside. It was a thrill every morning to step out onto that rocky plain, with the early morning sun casting long black shadows to the west, and various small knolls and hollows revealed clearly. There was usually a wind from the south, and loose fines moved in a sinuous flow over the ground, so that the rocks sometimes seemed to creep. Even the strongest of these winds could scarcely be felt against an outstretched hand, but they hadn't yet experienced one of the strong storm winds. At 500 kilometers per hour, they were pretty sure to feel something. At 20, nearly nothing. Nadia and Samantha walked over to one of the little rovers they had uncrated and climbed in. Nadia drove the rover across the plain to a tractor they had found the day before, about a kilometer to the west. The morning cold cut through her walker in a diamond pattern, as the result of the X-weave of the heating filaments in the suit material. A strange sensation, but she had been colder in Siberia many a time, and she had no complaints.
Man, I love Nadia. I love Nadia. She's just wants to do work. She just wants to do her job. She's not. She just wanted to do engineering. You know?
Yeah, just wanted to basically the same thing as fixing tractors in Siberia to her, just solving one problem after the other. I like the part when they were in that glider thing, that what was it, a blimp or a glider or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And they're just being pushed along by the superstorm. I thought that was a fun sort of like engineering. It kind of reminded me of The Martian. I mean, there's a lot in this book that reminds me of The Martian, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, this section, like if we're dividing the sections into their own little short stories, this section for sure is the Martian section of the book.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's just a lot. It's just Nadia kind of continuously solving problem after problem.
I mean, I would actually bet money that the author of The Martian read this book and was influenced by it, because
probably,
you know, even the way well, this is more about the Martian movie, but like the way the spacesuit is described is a lot more like the spacesuit used in the Martian film than, you know, any spacesuit that we actually have in real life.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wanted to use this as an opportunity to kind of just talk about all those different pieces of technology, because they are really, really interesting. Like this is such an elegant solution to, okay, what are we going to do? Like, we can't have these characters like walking around in big, huge spacesuits the entire book. It's just not going to work. And so we just kind of invented this non-pressurized but pressurized elastic mesh thing.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah. Yep.
And yeah, I mean, I like it, you know, like, again, going back to the overall structure of the book, we move through the journey of Mars, and the character who represents that is always this really, it's this really interesting choice. And, you know, as we get more into the political dealings, we start moving over to the more political characters. But here at the very beginning, their first moments on Mars, who better to see and experience all this than the engineer that's like responsible for making sure everything is working and fixing everything and solving all the day-to-day survival problems. Like we're almost kind of moving up Maslow's hierarchy of needs with these characters, you know. And this is the basic survivalist one first.
Yeah, everything was better when they were just barely fighting for survival, and then they got the freedom to start complaining and having political disagreements.
Yeah. I mean the technology. It's so funny because I remember the only thing I remembered about these books from when I was younger is my dad reading them, because I very distinctly have this memory of my dad reading a book called Blue Mars, and I was like, that's weird, Mars isn't blue, and that was my childhood thought about it. But when we figured out we were reading this for the book club, I asked him, and the one thing he said to me about this book was, it's all very implausible. And it's like, I think of all the different technological stuff Kim Stanley Robinson had to invent for this, and I think it's well researched, but yeah, like we still have nothing like anything, almost anything that exists in this story.
Yeah, I probably it was interesting. So just that, yeah, I guess this is a bit of an aside, but I thought it was funny how, he would write about how their genetic engineering technology worked, and it was kind of charming because it's like somebody in 1992 would imagine futuristic genetic engineering technology would work.
Sure.
But what's funny is like we have magical sci-fi genetic engineering technology now, but it doesn't really work the way that he describes in the book. So it's like that's just kind of a fun wrinkle where and then the other funny thing is like, just because we have the power to make any sort of cut that we want to make in the genome doesn't mean that we understand the implications of what that's going to do. So while if we knew what blueprint to make, we could make any blueprint, but we don't actually know like how to genetically engineer algae that'll survive on Mars.
Sure.
Because that's more of like an engineering problem than it is a biotechnology problem, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, again, and this is just, I think, one of the purveying tones of the whole book to me was this idea of like the casual nature in which all these characters solve really, really complex problems. Like, just like, and I think part of it is Sachs is such a casual, reserved, like at least posturing type of character. They're just like, oh yeah, just we'll just put some algae out there and terraform, and you're just like, wait, no, like this is like we can't just make atmosphere. It's like it's a lot of work, and like everything about this book, like it's even the space elevator, which is a concept I've read about before, and I know like the concept used in this thing is based off of other ideas that people have had about similar how space elevator stuff would work. Just like, oh yeah, we'll just get this asteroid, park it into orbit, and then turn it into a manufacturing facility, and then it'll just automatically manufacture 1,000 kilometers of 10 foot or 10 meter thick steel cable. Like it's just like it's everything. So everyone's so chill about all the incredible accomplishments of science they're doing.
Is enough diamond cable to wrap around the planet 2.5 times basically.
Yeah.
It's funny because it's like, okay, if you can do that stuff, then can't that's one thing that I almost didn't get, where I was like, wait, so like at the end of the book when they're just like flying, they're just driving around and like setting up like automated factories to build a whole city by themselves and then moving on. I'm like, wait, did they have this technology at the start of the book? I don't think they did.
No, but they're so casual about the fact that they're discovering all these new amazing things.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. People are talking about how it's funny that like a lot of this stuff is still unachievable today, but like a lot of it seems anachronistic. And Kirk points out having video rental stores in the cities. Like it's just like it's so funny the way Kim Robinson like saw things advancing in certain ways, and then no one could foresee things advancing in other ways. It's great.
Yeah. We've definitely the world of bits has grown exponentially. The world of tractors is not.
Yeah. I think what Bipolaron brings a great point here that maybe should have some more conversation on. There's a recurring element in this book of, we should do this, time skip. So we did it. and that, I mean, that's definitely true, right? And like it just seems, maybe it's just because these are all scientists and like every problem they encounter is not an unsolvable thing, but just another puzzle to solve. And so they're just like, so we're just gonna do that. And then we did. I think it's really interesting because there is a general level of unsatisfaction there, but I think kind of the reason for it, in my opinion, is that Kim Stanley Robinson is less interested in as much as interested in the details of the science, he's less interested in like the how they solved that particular problem, but like more interested in how the desire to even do those things comes in conflict with all other desires.
Yeah.
Like this is not a book about how to terraform a planet.
Yeah.
Like like that's it's not actually interested in like the conflict and struggles of how to do that. It's just like it almost immediately tells us that terraforming is inevitable. Like it just lays that out matter of factly, like that it's gonna happen no matter what, and don't worry about it. It's much more interested in those how those desires rise into ideological conflict.
Right, because it's fairly clear that the problem of terraforming Mars is not a problem at all. That
Yeah, yeah,
it's the human conflict that leads everyone to killing each other and basically destroying the planet,
yeah,
uh, or rather destroying almost all of the existing settlements, I guess.
yeah. We didn't pull a slide for this, but I gotta say, the escalated decision of the rebels to threaten Earth by slinging an asteroid at it was, I mean, it's rolling some dice there,
Uh-huh.
guys.
Yeah, yeah. It was. I think one element of the whole dynamic that was interesting to me is like even the supposedly smart characters like John somehow failed to realize that like, hey, the reason why Earth paid infinity dollars to send a massive colonization force to Mars was so that you could colonize it on behalf of humans
Yeah,
and then send resources back to Earth. Like this like never occurred to him. He like genuinely thought this was like we're going to this is the future, he is like a
yeah.
Star Trek character basically.
Yeah, I mean that's what I kind of meant about like the ideological purity of everything when we first
Mhm.
meet these characters on the Ares, that like they really just think we're just going to go there and we're going to like make a new world, and
Right.
like no one on Earth is going to want anything from us. I mean, yeah, we're going to like talk to them, but really we're really far away, so we'll be on our own. It's like that, no, like no way. No, like that's, I mean, honestly that's the main thing that's stopping like the real world from making any kind of super significant space travel stuff, is that like we haven't found the money yet.
Yeah.
And like the second we develop an ability to like mine precious minerals on Mars, fuck yeah, we're going to Mars. Like that's like inevitable, right?
Yeah.
But
Well, or another thing is like, hey, you know what? If Mars was if Mars happened to be a lush utopia, everybody would want to go to Mars. But Mars sucks. I like that was
yeah,
my one big takeaway from this book is how much Mars actually sucks.
yeah,
The part like one part that really impacted me actually was Michel Duval, the psychiatrist's
yeah. His homesickness section.
his terrible homesickness and like remembering being on Earth and not appreciating just the simple act of like walking around outside under the sun.
Yeah.
Um, and I was like, holy shit, he's right.
Yeah, but none of the other. It's so funny that like his section. Honestly, I forgot and I didn't pull any slides from it. So let's just talk about it here because I don't have a slide for it. So let's just talk about it here. It's the shortest little subsection of the book. It goes by very quickly and nothing really happens. It's just we meet this guy. He's supposed to be the one that's like making sure everyone here is okay, and he's like doing the worst out of all of them. And I love the line like, how could they only send one psychologist? Every psychologist on Earth goes to a psychologist, like we need at least two of us, like.
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah, it's just incredibly interesting because everyone else, like, there's so many passages about like the beauty of Mars, and we're about to get to one where Nadia kind of realizes the beauty of Mars, and like all these characters are like entranced by the beauty of Mars, or the challenge of discovery, or their ideology of building a new civilization, and then we need a character like that to just go, hey, I like going outside
Yeah.
and like being warm. I like
Yeah.
being warm,
That
and this place sucks balls.
yeah, no, I love that. I thought that was very that was something I have not seen in like a space colonization book before. I found it very refreshing actually.
Yeah, yeah.
I think the funniest part of the whole book is him describing this incredibly elaborate procedure he went through to map out all the personality types into this like hypercube,
Uh-huh.
and then realizing that he had just reinvented the four humors.
Yeah, yeah. That, like, gosh, like obviously Kim Stanley Robinson like read a book on psychology and then said we need to talk about this for a little while.
Hmm. Absolutely, yeah.
So moving on though, let's talk about Maya a little bit because here's the section where we get into what Maya is like when we see her from someone else's perspective. But one Saturday night, when she sat there, nearly comatose, Maya came over and sat against her shoulder for a talk. Maya, with her beautiful face, always well groomed, always the latest. What is that word? Chakarnust?
I don't know.
Even in their everyday jumpsuits, looking distraught. Nadia, you have to do me a favor, please, please. What? I need you to tell something to Frank for me. Why don't you just do it yourself? I can't have John seeing us talk. I have to get a message to him. And please, Nadisa, Francine, you're my only way. Please. Nadia made a disgusting noise. It was surprising how much Nadia would have rather been talking to Anne or Samantha or Arcady, if only Arcady would come down from Phobos. But Maya was her friend, and that desperate look on her face, Nadia couldn't stand it. What message? Tell him I'll meet him tonight in the storage area, Maya said imperiously, at midnight, to talk. Nadia sighed, but later she went to Frank and gave him the message. He nodded without meeting her eye, embarrassed, grim, unhappy. Then, a few days later, Nadia and Maya were cleaning up the brick floor of the latest chamber to be pressurized, and Nadia's curiosity got the best of her. She broke her customary silence on the topic and asked Maya what was going on. Well, it's John and Frank, Maya said querulously. They're very competitive. They're like brothers, and there's a lot of jealousy there. John got to Mars first, and then he got permission to come back again, and Frank doesn't think it was fair. Frank did a lot of the work in Washington to get the colony funded. He thinks John has always taken advantage of his work. And now, well, John and I are good together. I like him. It's easy with him. Easy, but maybe a little, I don't know, not boring, but not exciting. He likes to walk around, hang out with the farm crew. He doesn't like to talk that much. Frank, now we could talk forever, argue forever maybe, but at least we're talking. And you know, we have a very brief affair back on the Aries, back at the beginning, and it didn't work out, but he still thinks it could.
Oh, Maya. Nadia, that's what you get for asking.
Yeah, so thank you, Not, for looking up Chakarnust means. It apparently means opulence or luxury, but it's like a bad Russian translation, which makes sense that I've literally never heard that word before. So Maya, as we said, we see Maya from her perspective, and she seems like a, good head on her shoulders, smart. She's a leader. Like, that's one of the things we really talk about. Like, she was the quote unquote leader of the Russian group, while Frank was the leader of the American group. And then we switch over to Nadia's perspective, and we see her as, as uncharitably as possible, like a teenage girl,
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting because on the one hand, I hate this character. She drives me crazy. I don't like her at all. On the other, as we go further through the book, we see the ways in which John and Frank have both been very deliberately fucking with her. And I mean, I think specifically John sees Frank standing there and then is like, oh, I'm going to pay a little more attention to Maya because I know Frank really likes Maya. And then I love the section when he's like, and so, yeah, then we did it. And I was like, oh, wait, I think I might actually love her after they hooked up. And it's just like this poor girl is really just kind of tossed around, and it's she's not innocent in it, of course. Like, she's doing it as well, kind of unable to make up her mind between these two men, but they are definitely both fucking with her as well. And so there's no one single point of blame in this terrible love triangle.
Yeah, I think, as with everything in this book, it's a lens on our fallen, crappy nature.
Mm-hmm.
And all three of these people are basically struggling with the fact that they all really like and admire each other. Like, Maya's right that Frank actually sees John as a brother and vice versa, and they both love Maya and she loves both of them, but at the same time they all hate each other.
Yeah.
And they're, and at the same time they're just competing with each other for Maya's affection, and like there's all these sort of conflicting parts of people, and we're like these broken self-conflicting things that can never be happy, because we want too many different things at the same time, and I think the love triangle was just yet another way of talking about that.
Yeah, and there's no resolution there, right? Because both these men die. Like nothing is decided there. It's just both men die.
Yeah.
So love triangle solved because now it's just a dot.
I mean, the anti-climax of it all is amazing because
Yeah.
she gets with John and leaves Frank to just like seethe, which ultimately I think is a huge contributor to him murdering John.
Oh yeah,
And
I think there's a moment when he like he meets with John and is like basically begging him to give him a reason to like call off what he's planning, and then John asks where Maya is, and he's like, "Okay, fuck you. Let's go. Let's go. You're gonna die now." Yeah, it's so incredibly immature and childish from these fucking 80-year-old men.
Yeah, and then Frank tears himself up about it, like basically goes crazy with guilt over it.
Yeah,
and then dies without anybody ever finding out that's what happened. You know, like that was the most mind blowing thing to me. Is I felt like, given the way the books began, if this were a normal book, then like the plot would be the revelation to everyone of what Frank had done. But as it is, nobody's ever gonna find out. You know, like
no,
like it's so unsatisfying on purpose.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I think one of the things that's true about this book is everyone is so convinced that their ideology or their way of looking at things is the right way that they just assume that everyone else behaves the same way they do. Like there's a moment where like Frank, after the assassination and I think after the treaty signed too, he kind of goes off and lives with the traveling Arab folks for a while, right? Yeah. And like he enjoys them, and like is it Frank that tries to lecture them on their gender politics?
It is, yeah.
Which is really, really fascinating. And there's also this moment where like he decides that they know that he was the one that killed Salim, like that he set Salim up for the assassination and then killed him, and he decides with absolute certainty that they know, and that they were just reminding him that they know, and they have this power over him to kind of like back off. And there's like never any moment in the book outside of that Frank perspective that says that that's true, but like he's constantly playing this political game, and so he's assuming that everyone else is constantly playing this political game as well. I mean, that's why he looks at John, this pure idealist, and he says, "This has got to be bullshit," because of course it would be. It's I think that's like, you see it with Arcady as well. You see it with Nadia, and the frustration and the anger that comes from all these characters is the realization that, oh wait, no, people don't think the way I think, and that pisses me off.
Yeah, if everybody thought the way I think, then everything would be better.
Yeah,
and the problem with this whole situation is that people don't just do what I tell them, and yeah, that's basically every character, but sort of especially Frank.
Yeah.
I do like your point. I do wonder if there's any evidence that they actually do know that he killed John, or if that's all in his head because he's tormenting himself with guilt.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like, I don't know what motivation they would have to just kind of like keep that in their pocket. Like I mean, it's very possible they're keeping that in their back pocket to use against him at a later date, for sure. But like, I don't think every human being operates that way, and his assumption that they do is just perfect Frank.
Yeah, like those people in particular didn't seem like the kind of people who would be like, yeah, it's good that John is dead. Like,
yeah,
like that's not. Yeah. Anyway,
I do love the gender politics stuff was so delightful.
Was it? Yeah, like that was him kind of losing his control.
Yeah, saying the way he felt, because yeah,
like in a moment of psychological weakness, saying what he actually felt for once. Yeah.
And the way they just like yeah, we've already gotten there, buddy. You just don't see it because you can't see us. Like, that was really interesting, right? That like basically his wife comes up to him and says like, no, like, look, this is how I dress normally. You just don't get to see it because we're private people. I don't know. It's really fascinating stuff. I don't know enough about Middle Eastern culture to really comment on it specifically, but I love the ways in which he confronts them about this thing, and they laugh him off, and you're like, oh, those jerks. But then like his wife shows up later to just kind of demonstrate how he doesn't fully understand this whole thing. It's a very American thing to do, to just like say, this is what's wrong with your culture, and I
Hmm.
know because I am American.
Yeah. I mean, Robinson clearly read a lot about Middle Eastern cultures of various kinds
Sure,
because,
sure.
one thing that we learn is like, oh, there's like several factions within factions of certain nations or communities, and like, oh, these are the progressive ones of this kind of faction,
Sure.
and that's why they're on Mars. They're basically exiles.
Yeah. I do appreciate the part where the guy's like, no, there's never been a civil war in Islam. And Frank is like,
Yeah.
because that's what I was doing too. Because I was
Yeah.
like,
But that is kind of funny because I think in 1992 nobody knew about that, and now everybody knows about that.
yeah, that's true. I don't know about nobody. We didn't because we were 7. But
Well, yeah, I don't know. I would bet that it seems like there was a big education campaign on the whole Shia Sunni thing back in, just to pick a random number, 2001. Um, but
touche, touche.
anyway, shall we move on
Yeah.
to chapter slide 9?
Uh huh.
Okay. Hey everyone, I hope you like planetary geology. East of Cassini, the terrain grew rougher than ever. There was some of the oldest surface on the planet, cratered to saturation in the earliest years of torrential bombardment. A hellish age, the Noachian, you could see in that landscape. No man's land from a titanic trench war. The sight of it induced a kind of numbness after a while, a cosmological shell shock. They floated on, east, northeast, southeast, north, northeast, west, east, east. They finally came to the end of Xanthe and began to descend the long slope of Syrtis Major Planitia. This was a lava plain, much less densely cratered than Xanthe. The land sloped down and down until finally they drifted over a smooth-floored basin, Isidis Planitia, one of the lowest points on Mars. It was the essence of the northern hemisphere, and after the southern highlands, it seemed especially smooth and flat and low. And it too was a very large region. There really was a lot of land on Mars. Then one morning, they were lofted up to cruising altitude. A trio of peaks rose over the eastern horizon. They had come to Elysium, the only other Tharsis-like bulge continent that the planet had. Elysium was a much smaller bulge than Tharsis, but it was still big, a high continent, 1,000 kilometers long and 10 kilometers taller than the surrounding terrain. As with Tharsis, it was ridged by patches of fractured land, crack systems caused by the uplift. They flew over the westernmost of these crack systems to Phaestus Fosse and found the area an unearthly sight, 5 long, deep, parallel canyons like claw marks in the bedrock. Elysium loomed beyond, a saddleback in shape, Elysium Mons and Hecate's Tholus, rearing at each end of a long spine range, 5,000 meters higher than the bulge they punctuated. An awesome sight. Everything about Elysium was so much bigger than anything Nadia and Arkady had seen so far that, as the dirigible floated toward the range, the two were speechless for minutes at a time. They sat in their seats, watching it all float slowly toward them. When they did speak, it was just thinking aloud. Looks like the Karakoram, Arkady said. Desert Himalayas, except these are so simple. Those volcanoes look like Fuji. Maybe people will hike up them someday in pilgrimages.
So this is the slide that is going to represent a good 60% of the book, which is just the moments where Robinson goes on to just explain in incredible detail all the landmass features of the planet. And I want to say, like I said at the beginning, I found the stuff entrancing and beautiful in the beginning of the book, in this part in particular, as we kind of watch Nadia finally fall in love with the planet that she's been living on. She was so focused on her work. She loved the work and the challenge, but she really hadn't absorbed any of Mars yet, and she kind of falls in love with Mars thanks to both Anne and Arkady here. I was as sucked in as her, and then I just kind of got tired of reading the names of plateaus and canyons and mountain ranges, and I just I just eventually just kind of got sick of it.
Yeah, I felt like this would have maybe been marginally more interested if I had like a map of Mars to look at, because I mean it does give you a sense of this as a physical place with physical geography instead of just an abstraction. But yeah, there was a lot of it for sure.
The thing I like the most is that Robinson really pushed this idea, that Mars is big, like that the land mass on this planet is as big as the land mass on Earth.
Hmm.
And I think, and this is something that like every science fiction story does, where like when you go to Hoth, there's just like this like 2 square miles, and that's Hoth.
Yep.
Tatooine is Mos Eisley, like
Uh-huh.
especially in video games, and it's just because of like limitations in time and resources, right? That you can't actually show a whole planet worth of people. You just go to like one location on the planet, and that's the planet. But I really like how this is a big place, and it takes a long time to travel across. There's many different, by the end of it, there's many different cities and societies and peoples, and like it's big. It's a whole world. And I think when we think of planets, we always kind of mentally shrink them, because it's a our whole existence is focused on this one planet. So we see Earth as everything, and then so somewhere else must be just it's just this little place. But yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I think out of all of the books about other planets that I've read, this one is the one that did bother to make me feel like the visceral impact of having a whole world, a whole new world.
Yeah.
I kind of at certain points was comparing it to like what would it have felt like to be among the first colonists of the Americas, where you just have almost functionally unlimited land.
Yeah, basically infinite at that
Yeah.
point. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
You're never going to see the other coast of it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently there was a map in the book. I have
Yeah,
the audiobook. So.
it's not very good, Matt. Like, it's,
Mm.
I mean, I got nothing out of it. Here, I'll hold it up to the camera and you can look at it.
Right.
Here, I don't know if I can. There's the map. Ooh, look at it. It's a map. That's it.
Okay.
There's where Burroughs is. There's Elysium Planitia.
Yeah. Okay. That's I guess not having water really makes it hard to get to use the part of my brain that thinks about geography.
Yeah, I mean, because all of our understanding of geography is the huge masses of water to divide up the spots of land. Yeah.
Yeah. If not oceans, then at least rivers.
Mm-hmm.
Although I mean I did think it was cool the parts where they would talk about how like this part of Mars was clearly shaped by some kind of giant flood. This part was clearly shaped by glaciation, and now it all just looks like a bunch of red rocks. But it had this very convoluted and interesting history actually.
Yeah, for sure. So we move on to a new section now. We're in our James John Boone section, and I wanted to read this part here, and we'll talk about it a bit. Boone wandered out onto his suite's balcony. The concourse was filled with Hokkaido pines, and the chilled air stiff with resin. Copper figures walked below amongst the tree trunks. Boone considered the new situation. For 10 years now he had worked for Russell on terraforming, managing the moholes and doing PR and the like, and he enjoyed the work, but he wasn't on the cutting edge of any sciences involved, and so he was out of the decision-making loop. He knew that many people thought of him as a figurehead only, a celebrity for consumption back on Earth, a dumb space jock who had gotten lucky once and was living off that for good. That didn't bother John. There was always knee-high people hacking away, trying to get everyone down to their size. That was okay, especially since in his case they were wrong. His power was considerable, although perhaps only he could see the full extent of it, and it consisted of an endless succession of face-to-face meetings, of the influence he had over what people choose to do. Power wasn't a matter of job titles, after all. Power was a matter of vision, persuasiveness, freedom of movement, fame, influence. The figurehead stands at the front, after all, pointing the way. Despite all that, there was something to be said for this new task. He could feel that already. It would be problematic, difficult, perhaps risky. Above all, challenging. A new challenge. He liked that. Going back into his suite, getting into bed, John Boone slept here, it occurred to him that now he was going to be not only the first man on Mars, but the first detective. He grinned at the thought, and the last action of Omegendorf set his nerves aglow. Isn't it crazy these guys are just like totally addicted to drugs?
That was one thing. That was one of those things that I kept expecting to come up, is the fact that he's horribly addicted to this drug without realizing it.
He uses so much of it.
He just uses it every day.
Yeah,
all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, the idea of it's funny that the part of the book with him being the detective is It's fun, although I don't think that he. I don't know. It's funny. I have a hard time remembering like what did he actually find out. It's more of a sort of adventure section than most of the book, though.
Yeah, I mean, so I have to admit I was really excited because I was like, "Fuck yeah, detective! This is gonna be like the Martian noir detective story," and I was a little disappointed. I think I built it up too much in my head when I read this part right here. I mean, he definitely does like go around interviewing people, but it's like detective in like the real world way of being a detective and not in like the storytelling way,
Hmm.
which is just usually really time consuming, frustrating, and ultimately unsatisfying because that's what being a detective in real life is, you know? It's just like
Yeah.
a lot of talking to people and getting no information and then maybe, you know, a year later getting one little bit of information that unlocks the whole thing, maybe. And that's kind of exactly what happens here. Like he does solve it. He finds out who the saboteurs are, and he does find out that like like there's later attempts on his life, and he finds out that those two things are unrelated. But it's not like satisfying in any kind of like typical detective story type of way.
Yeah.
Like we said 7.5 deaths was unsatisfying last month, but like this makes that look
Yeah.
like brilliant Agatha Christie stuff.
Well, that's what's funny is discovering this in a normal detective novel, you would discover that the attempts on his life and the sabotage was related.
Yeah, all the
But the,
you're working two cases and they're related to each other. Yeah, it's the
yeah,
very
and it's, oh my God, yeah. But no, this is just like, no, no, no. The world is just a bunch of different people who want a bunch of different things, and some of them are gonna try to kill this guy, and some of them are gonna try to blow up stuff for totally different reasons.
yeah.
And we keep finding out little tiny tidbits of information about what Hiroko's doing, and we're like, is that what's that related to? Oh, we're just never gonna find out until literally the very end.
Oh yeah.
Um,
This is a good time maybe to talk about the coyote who is this is the section we first hear about the coyote.
uh-huh.
Um who is like this mythical figure on Mars that doesn't need a spacesuit, blah blah blah. All that's bullshit. But apparently there was a someone that was snuck on to the ship because God, so much of this book has people thinking they see someone. Like in the Maya section, it's like, I see someone and they don't look like anyone I know. How can that be? And then it just never, ever, ever pays off. And like,
Yeah.
yes, John meets the coyote, or Frank, I don't remember which one, meets the coyote. And then they're just like, hey, wait, you're the coyote. And he's like, huh, yeah,
Yeah.
the end.
And then he like shows up later, I think, to like lead them away when the place is under attack.
Hmm.
And is that him even? I don't know, man. I This is yet more stuff where I was like, structurally, what are we doing with this exactly?
Yeah.
Like what is, or even thematically, I'm not entirely sure because the idea is like, oh yeah, he's a coyote. He was here before you were, John. He's the he's this the trickster spirit of Mars.
No, he's just
Uh,
some guy with dreadlocks.
he's just some guy. I guess he's aligned with Hiroko, I
Yeah,
guess.
the only reason we know he's with Hiroko is because John is like the person you smuggled aboard. And I'm like, "Wait, John, how did you figure that out? I was in your head and you didn't tell me that." Yeah. Kirk is saying what I suspected, which is that I don't know if Kim Stanley Robinson was planning a trilogy when he wrote this book, but that is like the Thor goes to the pool and learns about the Infinity Gems moment of this book, where it's clearly to me setting something up that's going to pay off in a later story.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But it's just, I don't know. It's just so, it was so, I think understated is a great word because that not said, because yeah, it's like, this is, I think, to your point, like the ways in which this narrative eschews all normal narrative functions, which is that when you introduce this character in the almost the very beginning of the story, that like you have Maya see this guy that can't be anyone else, you're obviously clearly going to pay that off in a big way.
Yeah.
And the book is again just so casual about it. It's like, oh yeah, I'm that yeah, I was smuggled aboard. Yeah, that's okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah,
Move
we
it
set
on.
up a bunch of mysteries that we don't resolve. I mean,
Yeah.
we see Michelle gets, he leaves to go off with Hiroko, and then
Mm-hmm.
we don't see him again for the entire book until the very end, and then when we do, we don't really find out what he's been up to.
Yeah, no.
It's
I
just
mean,
like, oh, he's here now.
the whole Hiroko thing is bipolar on saying like they're doing like a whole thing that we never get to see, and obviously like the end of this book makes it very clear that whatever happens in the next one is going to largely circle around that, because that is the place that they end up, is in one of Hiroko's secret places. But yeah, it's just like this dangling thread that, like, I don't know, it was just like, what are we doing? What are we doing? I mean, maybe this was written to be one story across 3 books. I don't know, but
yeah, I don't know.
Man,
I don't know. Shall I move on?
Yes, let's do it.
All right. So here we have John Boone desperately trying to stave off the inevitable. And so he argued against revolution, nationalism, religion, economics, against every mode of Terran thought he could think of, all mashed together in his usual style. Revolution never even worked on Earth, not really, and here it's all outmoded. We should be inventing a new program, just like Arkady says, including the ways to take control of our fate. With you all living a fantasy of the past, you're leading us right into the repression you're complaining about. We need a new Martian way, a new Martian philosophy, economics, religion. They asked him just what these new Martian modes of thought might be, and he raised his hands. How can I say? When they've never existed, it's hard to talk about them, hard to imagine them, because we don't have the images. That's always the problem when you try to make something new. And believe me, I know, because I've been trying. But I think I can tell you what it will feel like. It will feel like the first years here, when we were a group, and we all worked together. When there was no purpose in life except to settle and discover this place, and we all decided together what we should do. That's how it should feel. But those days are gone, Marion said, and the others nodded. That's just your own fantasy of the past, nothing but words. It's like you're holding a philosophy class in a giant gold mine with armies bearing down on all sides. No, no, John said. I'm talking about methods for resistance, methods appropriate to our real situation, and not some revolutionary fantasy out of the history books. And around they went again and again until they were back at Sinzenina and had retired to the workers' room on the lowest residential floor. There they argued passionately through the time slip and long into the night. And as they argued, a certain elation filled John, because he could see them beginning to think about it. It was clear they were listening to him, and that what he said and what he thought of them mattered to them. This was the best return yet on the old first man fishbowl. Combined with Arkady's stamp of approval, it gave him an influence over them that was palpable. He could shake their confidence. He could make them think. He could force them to reevaluate. He could change their minds.
And then he died.
And the one guy who probably agreed with Frank about what needed to happen, Frank killed him.
Yeah. I think this is the greatest piece of evidence right here, and that's why I pulled it for your theory that that by killing John, Frank kind of doomed everyone. Because there is, I mean, I do think it's very funny that one of the ways Maya describes John is as a very boring person that doesn't like to talk a lot. And we kind of see here that that's not true. Perhaps Maya, he just thinks you're boring and doesn't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, this is it's so funny to me, because he's there are so many scenes in this book, and I think Robinson does this very, very intentionally. Right, one after another, we have this whole 200-page section where we see John kind of go to travel around Mars, visit these different peoples, learn about them, talk with them, and then we see Frank do a kind of similar thing. And the way they talk to these people and the way they argue and reason with these people are so vastly different, even though in essence they agree with the same thing, kind of. And I think that's so interesting. This idea that John legitimately believes that the way to change people's mind is to just talk with them earnestly and honestly. And I mean, to his credit, it seems like, and this could just be his perspective, I don't know, the narrators are so unreliable here. Maybe he's just wrong and he hasn't actually changed their minds at all. But he really feels like he is.
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, I get the sense that people do find him charismatic and persuasive and inspirational, because I think he's exactly right. I really like what Kyrgyzstan just said in the chat, that all the people arguing against revolution, saying that revolution is a fantasy, are kind of painted as regressive and blinkered within the text, but then the book backs them up. And I think that's what John is saying here is he's totally right, because what kind of happens in the book is people use the old-fashioned techniques of revolution and revolt.
Mm-hmm.
And the consequence is like, hey, you know what? You guys live in bubbles. And they just get smashed like
Yeah.
mercilessly. And they're all like shocked. They're like, how could this happen? It's like, you idiots. Like
Yeah.
you live in glass domes.
Yeah. Literally, they just have to take a pin and pop it, and then
Yeah.
you're all fucked.
And it's all computer controlled, and they can just hack your computers and kill everyone.
Yeah.
And they can orbitally bombard you if they want, and they can do whatever they want to you. Like, you can't, if you're going to revolt, it can't, it has to be appropriate to your actual specific situation. You have to be creative, and you have to have some ingenuity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's going to look actually more like compromise than it looks like the fantasy of glorious revolution. It's probably going to look more like you only get like 25% of what you wanted, but then they only get 25% of what they wanted, and that guy over there only gets 25% what he wanted, and on the whole nobody's happy, but society continues to exist and nobody gets blown up.
Yeah.
And I think John is right here, and the book kind of bears that out, I think.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right that we kind of glorify revolt in that way, and not that revolutions aren't sometimes absolutely necessary, right? But there is this kind of, it's going to be like, I love where they compare it directly to the American Revolution, right? It's like,
Mhm.
it's not going to be that way. It's not going to be no, you're, too much has changed, like some revolutionary fantasy out of the history book. I love it so much. I'm talking about the methods for resistance, methods appropriate to our real situation. Like, yes, there's ways to resist, there's ways to revolt, but like, it's not going to be the same. And I mean, and the thing about Frank is he thinks his way is doing what John is saying, right? Like, this is the ways in which they're so similar. Frank thinks that by going to the UN and by brokering this deal, this compromise deal, is the way to ensure that everything keeps going. But Frank is wrong too.
Yeah, because they actually have no real power.
Yeah.
And it's not. You'd have to be creative to think of some way that the Martians could actually have their own power base that isn't just purely hot air.
Yeah.
I love one of the greatest fuck you Frank moments is like, he thinks that he's made this big win, this big like political win, where he's gotten some, forget the exact details, but like he's gotten some treaty signed or something that he's happy with, and like almost immediately one of the like corpo types is just like, makes it obvious that like nobody's gonna actually follow that treaty, and this is just something that everyone has agreed to get the Martians to settle down.
Well, let's read this next section, because that's about the treaty, and we can talk about that. So when they signed the new treaty, Maya was not at his side, not even in Burroughs, which was a relief in many ways, really, and yet he could not help but feel empty and cold in his chest, and certainly the others of the first 100, at least, knew something had happened between them, again, which was infuriating, or so he told himself. They signed the thing in the same conference room in which they had hammered it out, with Helmut doing the honors with a big smile, and each delegate coming up in turn, in penguin suit or black evening gown, to say a few words for the cameras and then put their hand to the document, a gesture that only Frank seemed to see as bizarrely archaic, like scratching a petroglyph. Ridiculous. When it was his turn, he went up and said something about striking a balance, which was exactly it. He had arranged the competing interests to strike together at angles that matched their momentum exactly, arranging a traffic accident so that all the vehicles would collide into a single solidified mess. The result was something not all that dissimilar to the precious version of the treaty, with both emigration and investment, the two main threats for the status quo, if there was such thing on Mars, mostly blocked. And this was the clever part, blocked by each other. It was a good piece of work, and he signed it with a flourish. For the United States of America, he announced emphatically, glaring around the room intently. That would play well on vid. So he strode through the subsequent parade with the cold satisfaction of work well done. The grass-floored tents and walk tubes of the city were crowded with thousands of spectators, and the parade wound through them, wandering down the big canal-side tent with the diversions up to the mesas, coming back down and crossing every canal bridge to cheers, and proceeding up to Princess Park for a great street party. The weather people had set for cool and crisp, with brisk downslope winds. Kites dueled under the tent roofs like raptors, their colors bright against the dark pink afternoon sky. Frank found the party in the park unsettling. There were too many people watching him, too many who wanted to approach him and talk. That was fame. You talk to groups. So he turned around and walked back up the canal side tent.
Uh, he so desperately wants to be famous and important and has no idea how to do that, actually.
You know, Kirk, I thought it was supposed to be previous version as well, but it's in this version of the book as well. I'm pretty sure. So I don't know why it would be Precious version of the treaty, but it's in this version too. So because I read that and I was like, that can't be right, and I checked it. So maybe this is just a misprint. I
Yeah,
don't know.
it's probably a typo in the
Yeah,
book. That's funny.
yeah.
Gonna Ron Burgundy it though.
Yeah, but I mean, so here it is, right? This is Frank's big move, and I think you're right. Like similar to the previous version of the treaty, Frank, that they already weren't listening to. I love the conversation before even this treaty ratification came up, where all the international corporations are just like, isn't that illegal? They're like, well, I mean, yeah, but like the treaty will be up in like 9 years, so we're just getting ready for it. And it's just
Mhm.
like, no, everyone's not going to listen to it.
Yeah, right. And there's marginal enforcement for a treaty that is it's like okay, but like they have the spaceships and they have the mercenaries, so who cares what somebody signed? There's not
Yeah,
the United States military on hand to enforce the treaty or whatever. So
yeah, and I think there's something. I was kind of, as we were talking through these past two slides, I was kind of trying to think like, what is the reason why like Frank and John are kind of aligned on this idea that bloody revolution is not the way to actually get things done. We have to compromise. We have to talk through it. Why is it that Frank's compromise failed? And I think it's like I love this description here. Like competing interests strike together at angles that match their momentum exactly, arranging a traffic accident so that all vehicles would collide into a single solidified mass. So, like, Frank's version of compromise is not everyone gives a little and gets a little, right? Frank's version of compromise is mutually assured destruction, basically.
mhm.
That if everyone knows that by doing anything they fuck up everything, that they will act in the most rational, self-interested way. And the problem with that is that's not how humans do.
Yeah. Well, and even if you take that metaphor literally and say that you arrange a perfect traffic accident, that only works to stall people until they can like back their car out and then drive around it,
Yeah,
which is what happens. Is this is all it is it's a moderately successful stalling measure.
yeah. And also, traffic accidents are bad, and the
Uh-huh.
people get hurt in them. So
Yeah.
like, it's a bad metaphor, Frank.
Yeah, there's no. I mean, I think I see this as a situation where like Frank doesn't realize that things can be win-win, even if you have to sacrifice something, you can get something else.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and I love how this reinforces Frank's performative nature, right? This idea that like he looks at the absurdity of actually signing a physical document and says this is ridiculous, blah blah, but then he walks up there and does his own version of it for the United States of America, and that would play well on the vid. Like everything he does is calculated and considered to how it would play to the political side of it. I think there's like I think that John and the Frank are two. They're both political actors in the world, right? But there's different kinds of political actors. There's the type of person that like needs to have every movement, every thought, everything that they do and say and how they appear as like calculated and careful and focus grouped. And then there's the type of person, then these people exist that are just kind of naturally charismatic. They can just walk into a room and just with very little effort automatically become the focal point of the room. That just like with the way that they speak and the way that they carry themselves, like they just naturally are that person. And that is not Frank. He's not that person. It's not that he's like not well spoken when he wants to be. It's just like he has to like work
yeah,
really hard at it.
right. It kind of reminds me of the classic introvert and extrovert dichotomy
Sure.
where Frank can do it, but it's work, it's exhausting, it's not him, and basically no one knows him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas everybody knows John. With John, what you see is what you get. And he just at most he puts on a little bit of a little bit of a persona, um, to entertain people, but the persona I think is still mostly him.
Yeah, I mean, John would love the party in the park, right?
Yeah.
Like he would love talking to those people, and not just for what he could get out of it, but just for the genuine like, oh, I love hanging out with these people, and they like me because
Mhm.
I'm the famous guy, and I'm here for it. Yes, everyone pay attention to me. I love this. It's great.
Yeah. I mean, just stripping it away from the specifics of the story, it's like if you have two people, and one of them expects other people to be happy to see him, and the other one expects people to be suspicious and lie,
Yeah,
and like everybody's gonna like that first guy better.
yeah. I actually think the book points this out directly.
Hmm.
When people come up to Frank and talk to him, his gut instinct is, what do you want from me?
Hmm.
Whereas I think if people come up to John and talk to him, his gut instinct is, oh, this person thinks I'm really cool.
Yeah, yeah. This is an opportunity for me to give them a fun story about the time they shook John Boone's hand.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's such a different way of looking at the world.
Yeah.
It's like Frank is, God, he's so great. He's so great. I read a review of this book that said the characters weren't well characterized. And I just like, the reason I did not enjoy parts of this book was not that at all. I
Yeah.
think the characters of Frank and John are
Right.
phenomenal.
All of the things that are abnormal about this book are completely intentional, and the one thing that it's best at is the characterization and the characters and the psychology. It's just the characters don't have traditional narrative arcs.
Yeah.
Shall I read the next slide?
Yeah. And you can read this part in the script with the sufficient amount of sarcasm.
Yeah. So the book now spends like 100 to 150 pages with Frank just wandering around Mars as things get worse and worse and worse. We catch up with him as the revolution has begun. Arkady is dead, but the revolutionists take out the space elevator. During all this time, Sachs never left the screen, and now he was muttering through pursed lips as he typed and read. The second time around, the speed of the fall would accelerate to 21,000 kilometers per hour, he said, almost 6 kilometers a second, so that for anyone within sight of it, a dangerous place to be, deadly if you were not up on a prominence and many kilometers away, it would look like a kind of meteor strike and cross from horizon to horizon in less than a second. Sonic booms to follow. Let's go out and have a look, Steve suggested with a guilty glance at Anne and Simon. A lot of them suited up and went outside. The travelers contented themselves with a video image piped in from the exterior cameras, alternating that with video clips gleaned from the satellites. Clips shot from the night side surface were spectacular. They showed a blazing curved line cutting down like an edge of a white scythe that was trying to chop the planet in two. Even so, they found it hard to concentrate, hard to focus on what they were seeing and understand it, much less feel anything about it. They had been exhausted when they had landed, and now they were even more exhausted, and yet it was impossible to sleep. More and more video clips were being passed along, some from robot cameras flying in drones on the dayside, showing a blackened, steaming swath of destruction, a regolith blasted to the side in two long parallel ejecta dikes, banking a canal full of blackness, black all studded with a brecciated mix of stuff, which got more exotic as the impact became more severe, until finally a drone camera sent along a clip of a horizon-to-horizon trench of what Sachs said must be rough black diamonds. The impact at the last half hour of the fall was so strong that everything far to the north and south was flattened. People were saying no one close enough actually to see the cable hit survived it, and most of the drone cameras had been smashed as well. For the final thousands of kilometers of the fall, there were no witnesses. So this is just an incredibly apocalyptic event that they have caused.
I love it. I love it so, like, the space elevator sections of the book were so cool. Just like the concept of this thing is something that like my brain, like I comprehend the science behind it, you know, like this idea that like that gravity and then the centripetal force would keep the cable in this constant suspended state, you know, like it makes sense to me. I get it. But like in action, like my brain is still going, but how cable not fall down? And like, so then there is this moment where the cable does fall down and you get to like actually see, like, I'm assuming a scientifically accurate depiction of what it would look like if you have this 30 something thousand kilometer long thing just suddenly crash down on a planet that's spinning, and so it's not just going to fall straight down. It's gonna wrap, and because the taller parts are coming from higher and they're thus going faster, it's going to get faster and faster and faster. It's basically like a whip, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like
it's what Kirk says. It's a planetary whip crack, and I think that if you had a material that could withstand this much tension and heat, then it probably would do this. I kept thinking probably what would really happen is the cable would disintegrate, but it would still be falling, disintegrating chunks of incredibly fast moving stuff. And also, I don't know, maybe it would hold together. I don't know.
it's just so like I think the thing that really spoke to me on this is like we do these things, and this is why I love the fact that a lot of the science in this is so matter of fact. It's just like, yeah, we just fucking build a fucking space elevator. Yeah, it's fine. Like, it's hard. What? Like, they just do these things, and no one like stops to think about the potential consequences of them. Like, it feels like safety in a lot of these scientific endeavors is so second. It's like it's the second thought. Like, I mean, we didn't talk about it, but the idea of inventing basically eternal life, and they're just like, could that possibly have a consequence? And John is immediately like, if they find out about this on Earth, there's gonna be like a huge reaction to this, because it's gonna literally change everything. And like, any of the scientists are like, what? I mean, why would you they haven't even thought about it. They have, and that's the same with this thing. Like, we build thousands and thousands of kilometer 10-meter long or 10-meter wide cable, and like, we hope that nobody ever fucks it up enough to where it like comes crashing down on people. And it's just like the awe-inspiring power of science and creation, and the ways in which that thing can get completely out of our control.
Yeah, I mean, this is more of that like godlike power stuff.
Yeah, where... like going back to the Olympians, like, they're just like, they're not thinking it through, because like, they're fucking gods. Why would I think? Yeah.
I mean, taking literally, they built a gateway to heaven. And then, due to their hubris, they destroyed the gateway to heaven, and the gateway to heaven fell to the earth and split it in half, basically. Is
it Sachs that's comment on it as like, huh, well, now the map really looks like what I thought the Earth looked like when it had this big black line along the equator. Like,
everybody's like, shut up, Sachs. Yeah, that was great. Just a brief aside about the nature of whips. Just this comment that Neil Stephenson made at one point, that like, whips are kind of fascinating because they're a technology that allowed literally prehistoric humans to break the sound barrier.
Yeah,
it's just kind of amazing to think about how powerful like the concept of a whip is. Actually,
it doesn't feel real, right? Like, when you say, oh yeah, that's a sonic boom, that's breaking the sound barrier, I'm like, no, it's not. It's a like, but yeah, it's great.
I mean, have you ever seen the thing that where a guy takes like a big piece of chain and he like runs really fast in one direction, and then he quickly turns and runs in the other direction, and the consequence is that this like really, really heavy chain, which is hard for a person to move, like the whip action moves through the chain, and you have the consequences. The far end of this giant thick chain like snaps, and it's like this terrifying, like, if anybody were there, they would be killed. And all it was is just somebody just like running one direction and running the other direction with the chain.
Physics is so cool. It's amazing.
It is.
John asked, have either of us watched the Foundation TV show? I have not. I keep meaning to. I think one time we turned it on for like 5 minutes, and then my wife and I were just like, we're not in the mood for this right now. And so we turned it off, and I have not gone back to it. I keep meaning to. You haven't watched it? No, you don't have Apple TV, so you literally can't watch it.
No, I have not watched it, and I cannot watch it. So,
well, there you go. All right. So now things continue to get worse, and we're back with Anne as we watch poor Red Mars gets destroyed. It seemed impossible in all the noise and vibration that their little cars would survive. The travelers clutched their chair arms, or lay there on the floor like Anne, isolated by the roar, their veins pumping with an awful mix of ice and adrenaline. Even Anne, who did not care, found her breath short and her muscles tensed against the kinetic assault. When they could hear each other's shouts again, they asked Anne what had happened. Dully, she stared out the window, ignoring them. Apparently they were going to survive, for the moment at least. The flood surface was now the most shattered, chaotic terrain she had ever seen, the ice pulverized to a plain of wicked shards. The high point of the lake had climbed their bench until it had only 100 meters downslope from them. The re-exposed wet ground down there had turned from rusty black to dirty white in less than 20 seconds. Freezing time on Mars. Sachs had stayed in his seat throughout all that, absorbed by the flickering on his screen. A lot of water would evaporate, or rather freeze and sublime. He muttered to no one as he worked. It was very pure water, almost distilled, but it would end up as dust-filled snow, falling somewhere else. The atmosphere might get hydrated enough so that it would snow several times, or even on a regular basis, in cycles of precipitation and sublimation. Thus, the floodwater would get distributed pretty evenly planet-wide, except perhaps at the highest altitudes. Albedo would rise dramatically. They would have to lower it, presumably by encouraging the snow algae that the Archeron group had created. But there was no more Archeron, Anne said to him in her mind. Black ice would melt by day, then freeze at night, sublimate, and precipitate. And thus they would have a waterscape, streams collecting, pooling, running downstream, freezing and expanding in cracks in the rock, subliming and snowing and melting and running again. A glaciated or muddy world, most of the time, but a waterscape, nevertheless. And every single feature of the primal Mars would melt away. Red Mars was gone. Anne lay there on the floor by the window. Her tears poured out of her to join the flood, over the dam of her nose, downstream until her right cheek and ear and the whole side of her face was wet.
Gonna be honest, I never really felt for Anne here.
She's just such an unlikable character throughout most of it that you feel more bad for Mars itself than you do for Anne. Actually, that's a question. That's a question to ask you, Matt. Do you feel bad for Mars here? Do you feel bad that this world is now in essence gone?
Not at all. The thing I felt bad about was that all of these people who had made all of these settlements across Mars were killed in this, atrocious, military action against civilians, basically. And that was the consequence of this massive deluge, or I guess flood, never mind, whatever. But the idea that like the natural beauty of this dead rock world would be wiped out, I'm like, I don't care at all. You got a lot of photos. We're good. I don't know. That's just me personally. I mean, I think the way in which I feel anything about this is that her tears are maybe not really for the planet. The tears are for like the time that they all had together on Red Mars, like Red Mars being a time of mutual struggle and camaraderie. But the thing is, that's not even really true, because Anne never really felt a lot of camaraderie for her comrades.
I don't like. Look, I don't like Anne very much. There's a part of me that does see this as like, we came to a place and we did and we did what we do, which is we wiped it clean and made it ours, and they're like, I understand there's no life here. It's dead. It's not conscious. It's not anything we would consider life. But like, it was a place and it existed, and it was a thing out there in the universe. And we kind of came in and just went, fuck all that. And it's ours now. And we're just gonna, through our recklessness, release incredibly powerful forces that are just going to rip it apart and change it, irrevocably change it to suit our whims. And like, look, I understand. I think generally terraforming is really cool. Like, I've never once in my life thought about terraforming in this kind of angle of like, well, what about like the beauty of the thing that existed before that? I was like, but we can't live there. It was my response. Was always my response to that. So I do appreciate that even for a moment, and again, I'm not totally with her, but even for a moment, like, I could understand the point of view of the person who says, look at this place. Nothing in the universe looks like this place. It is wholly unique. It is its own thing. It is a world untouched by anything that is us, and we've now changed it forever. I don't know. I get it.
I mean, I can get it without empathizing with it at all.
Sure, sure.
Because my immediate gut reaction is like, yeah, you know what? We've got 7 other planets in the solar system, and literally probably billions and billions of other planets elsewhere in the universe that are never going to be ruined by humans. So just feel good about them, then let
Yeah.
us have this one.
I feel good
Anyway,
about Mars 7 out there somewhere.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm very pro human. I mean, really, what is beauty if no one ever gets to actually see it?
Sure. I like what Doom says here. I intellectually agree with the Greens, but things going away feels like a loss. Yeah, I like that.
Just the wanton destruction of like the cable and all that, like that just that seems like a metaphor for just us being really poor stewards of our environment.
Yeah.
Which that does make me feel sad, but that's sad about us being incompetent, not sad specifically about Mars losing its beauty.
Yeah, I mean, like the great irony here is that the incredible destruction that is ripped across the planet is the thing that basically creates the exact terraforming thing that Sax was trying. And that's where we get that beautiful moment where he's like, "This is not the way. This is not the way I would have done it." But at the end of the day, it has accomplished his goal nonetheless.
Right.
All right,
Let's wrap it up,
let's
Scott.
do it.
The end. Overhead was an enormous dome of gleaming white ice. They stood under it as if under a giant overturned bowl. The dome was several kilometers in diameter, and at least a kilometer high, maybe more. It rose swiftly from the perimeters, and then bowled gently across the center. The light was diffuse but fairly strong, as if on a cloudy day, and it seemed to come from the white dome itself, which gleamed. The ground under the dome was gently rolling reddish sand, grassy in the hollows, with frequent stands of tall bamboo and gnarled pine. There were some small hillocks to the right, and clustered in these was a little village, 1 and 2 story houses painted white and blue, interspersed with large trees which had bamboo rooms and staircases set in their thick branches. Michel and Cassé were walking toward this village, and the woman who had guided their cars into the tunnel lock was running ahead, shouting, "They're here! They're here!" Under the other side of the dome, there was a lake of faintly steaming open water, its surface a white sheen lined by waves that broke on the near shore. On the far shore stood the blue bulk of a rickover, its reflection a smear of blue across the white water. Gusts of cold, damp wind nibbled at their ears. Michel came back and retrieved his old friends, who were standing like statues. "Come on, it's cold out," he said with a smile. "There's a water ice layer stuck to the dome, so we have to keep the air below freezing all the time." People were spilling out of the village, calling out. Down by the little lake, a young man appeared sprinting toward them, gazelling over the dunes in great leaps. Even after all their years on Mars, such a flying run still looked dreamlike to the first 100, and it took a while before Simon clutched Anne by the arm and cried, "That's Peter! That's Peter!" "Peter," she said, and then they were in a crush of people, many of them young folk and children, strangers, but with familiar faces everywhere making way to the fore. Hiroko and Iwao, Raoul, Raya, Jean, Peter crashing in to hug Anne and Simon, and there were Vlad and Ursula and Marina and several others from the Acheron group, all clustered around them, reaching to touch them. "What is this place?" Maya cried. "This is home," Hiroko said. "This is where we start again."
Oh, what a happy ending.
Everything's happy. Yay.
Theoretically.
Yeah. I don't. And these are all the clones, I guess. You made all these clones by mixing together people's
Yeah.
zygotes or whatever.
Hiroki,
Not
like
zygotes.
John's upset. Like
Gametes.
he's so upset about that. John is, and then Hiroki's like, "Well, it's not like it changed anything for you. It's like."
Yeah.
You didn't want a kid 5 years ago, so that means you shouldn't be mad about it now. No, I'm still gonna be fucking mad that you made a copy of me.
Yeah.
That you took my
And-
DNA and made more life with it without my consent. Yeah, I'm gonna be mad about that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'd be mad about that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be mad about that for
See,
sure.
I mean, I definitely think there is supposed to be a hopeful tinge to this, but it's hard for me to look at this and say, "Oh, it's definitely going to be better this time. We fucked up the last time, but this time we're going to do it right."
Yeah. It's funny because we don't really know too much about what Hiroko's actual um ideology is. Like it's this thing where it's always like, oh, and Hiroko always has her followers, and it's like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
what Well, how exactly? Like, who are they? What do they believe? What is? Oh, well, you're not going to tell us. Oh, they're
Nope.
gone now.
That's for the next one.
I guess that's for the next one.
That's for the one with Thanos in it.
What?
Well, it's like the Avengers was
Oh, I
like
get it. Thanos will return.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know. It is definitely hopeful, but I don't know. I don't know. I've like so this like the final moments of the book are like, Peter's alive, yay! And I'm just like, who?
Right. No, I mean it's downright funny because it's definitely a horribly sad, tragic ending. It is all. I don't think this really happened, but it almost feels like the editor was, the book was turned in with the ending just being they absolutely ravage the face of Mars and everybody dies.
Yeah.
And it's a complete desolation. And the editor was like, "You can't end the book this way." And then he grudgingly was like, "All right, I'll have them find Hiroko's settlement, so at least like 3 of our beloved characters get to live, even though none of them are the characters we really care that much about, except
Yeah.
Nadia. And I'll throw you a bone and say that Anne finds her son Peter.
Yeah, her son lived the cable collapsing. That's God. It's such a weird choice that like one of these prologue-esque sections is we get to see Peter and how he survived the collapse of the cable, and I'm just like, cool. I get like I don't know who this guy is. Like I know he's Anne's son, but like that's all I know about him. We've never seen him before. I have no attachment to this person as a character at all. I'm just like, okay, is he gonna like do anything though? Is like there a reason why we're taking time out of the story to specifically show him floating through space until he just happens to be picked up by someone? No, just so like in the last paragraph of the book he can find his mama again, and I guess be in the sequel presumably. But yeah, I don't know. It's one of those weird things like the coyote where I'm just like, why was that there?
Right. It felt very weird. It felt very weird for a book that has mostly kept to a small handful of POVs to just be like, and then we're gonna jump over this guy,
Mm-hmm.
and now not anymore. I mean, and it was also kind of funny because we knew that he survived long before Anne knew that he survived,
Yeah, yeah,
which functionally just robs us of the tension of like, oh, is Anne's son gonna live? Because, actually, like, I almost would have preferred it if we didn't know that he lived, so that we could at least feel her relief. But as it was, we had the dramatic irony of knowing that he survived already. So,
mm-hmm.
um,
It just felt like another thing in this book where I'm just like, why did okay, I mean it's not like it's bad per se, but I was just like, okay, like this is the
yeah,
final these are the final sentences of the book. This is the moment where you like, let's summarize everything we've been doing, and it's like, and Peter's here.
yeah,
It's like, okay, good. I'm glad. I mean, I'm glad her child's not
yeah.
dead. Like
I guess
I'm happy for her.
if we want to dig for the themes, then the idea is like for all of this devastation and death, um, people have successfully colonized Mars because even the woman who was the most against colonizing Mars has a child on Mars,
Yeah.
which means almost by definition that she wants there to be a future of human life on Mars.
Yeah.
Um, and they find this place which is like a little bucolic town under the ice, which is much more kind of homey and human than anything that we've seen up to this point. It's funny, they don't really describe what a lot of the other settlements look like very often, but you don't get the sense that they look like this. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah. I love that the dome is still is it still makes everything really cold. So like, 'cause
yeah,
you can't escape the cold on Mars. There's nothing you can do. Yeah.
yeah. But I guess the good thing about this settlement is that it's totally hidden from anyone on the surface finding them or doing
Yeah.
anything to them.
Yeah. Fuck those guys. I hate everyone. I hate them all.
Yeah. Oh, that Kirkland's mentioning Kirk rather is mentioning the Paul Bunyan story, where it's just like an adaptation of the Paul Bunyan legend
But on
to
Mars.
all of
Yeah.
like the Mars geography. I thought that was pretty cute.
No. Yeah. I wish I had pulled that. Actually, I did enjoy that. That was a fun little thing. I think some of those quote unquote prologue sections are some of my favorite parts of the book. I think it's where Robinson is maybe allowing himself to have the most fun with his prose.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I think my favorite things about this book are the prose and the character psychology. Um, and those are absolutely stellar. Like that
Hmm.
makes me see why people like this book. It's a
Yeah,
very weird book in a lot of ways, though.
it's we talked this week about The Matrix Resurrections, which is a movie that I liked quite a bit, for the ideas that it had, but a lot of the beat to beat moments of the storytelling didn't quite work on me. And I think it's very similar to how I feel about this book, where like the ideas are so interesting. What he is doing with this book is so interesting to me, but like the moment to moment experience of reading it all was very, very difficult on me. And I think the cool thing about reading is, as time goes on, I will forget all the terribleness of struggling to turn the next page, and I will only remember the ideas and the characters and the things it was doing. And so I will look back on my time with this book very fondly. But the actual experience of sitting here trying to finish this book before today was it was rough. It was hard. It was difficult for sure.
Yeah. This was one of those books where sometimes it happens that I listen to the whole audiobook at the start of the month, and it's because I'm enjoying it so much that I just blow through it, and then I don't remember it too well by the end of the month. But this
Hmm.
time, I had trouble making myself listen to it, and this week I basically said, okay, I have this many hours left, so I better prioritize finishing it. So I was in the same boat as you,
Yeah,
in that it's not that I didn't enjoy big parts of this book. I did enjoy big parts of this book, but other parts of this book were a bit of a drag. And the only thing that got me through those, I think, was just like the actual prose, the
sure.
quality of the writing, and
Yeah.
not the story so much, not the characters so much.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree with that for sure. It is fantastically written in the individual prose. Like
Mm.
there were so many moments that I just kind of stopped and like wrote down parts of it that was like, wow, that's a great turn of phrase there. I really like what you did there. It's very easy to see why this book is so beloved for sure. Like I think last month, no, not last month, a couple months ago, we did Ancillary Justice, which is a book that won a bunch of awards that I was struggling to see why it won as many awards as it did. This was a book that won a bunch of awards that was like, I get it. Totally get it.
Mhm.
It's not my favorite. I struggled with it, but I completely get why people love this.
Yeah. Um, in many ways, it's genius.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even the ways that I don't particularly like it, I I would argue that they are all intentional, and
Yeah.
they're in some sense making a statement about human nature.
Hmm. Yeah.
So yeah.
Kirk says one of the things I'll always think about this book is driving home just how big of a thing the space elevator is. And that's on Mars. A space elevator on Earth would be even bigger. Yeah, don't they say it takes 5 days to get up it? Like that's how long the journey takes. 5 days, which is insane.
Yeah, I think so. I don't remember that. I don't remember the exact number, but yeah, I mean, if you're just accelerating at a moderate speed,
Hmm.
um, yeah, you gotta go pretty far before you reach kind of the stable endpoint of a.
Yeah.
So, um,
Do you think we're ever gonna build something like that?
I do actually. Although it's funny because we're getting our rocket technology so cheap now that a lot of the stuff that I think people thought we were going to need space elevators to do, we're actually going to be able to do with just cheap reusable rockets. But yeah, I think we're getting better and better every year at fabricating carbon nanotubes and similar structures. And at a certain point, I think it'll be possible and then trivial to do such a thing.
Hmm. John asked the question I was about to ask you, Matt. Do you think you'll read the next two books in the series or other
No,
books by Kim Stanley Robinson?
probably not. Do you? What do you think?
There's part of me that has a really strong sense of curiosity for where it's gonna go from here, because I know that the third is called Blue Mars, and I was like, is it gonna be
Mm,
is it gonna become ocean
yeah.
planet? What does
What does
that
that
mean?
mean? Yeah.
Um, and of course it'll have a metaphorical meaning as well.
Right.
But I do have a sense of curiosity of where the story goes from here, but like I won't say never, but probably not right away.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is I kind of expect not to be super entertained, but enriched in other ways. And it's really hard for me to make myself read books that are going to be enriching but not entertaining because I'm like fundamentally I we already do a lot of reading that's mainly for enriching, which is book club.
Yeah.
If I'm going to read something outside of book club, it's usually going to be some trash that I'm just reading to entertain myself. So
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I don't know. I want to force myself to read books that are more enriching for sure, but I just have very little time to read.
Not and Aurora are mentioning the Kim Stanley Robinson book Aurora,
I think
which
Doom
is
meant
apparently his maybe the favorite maybe not says maybe Not's favorite book is Aurora. So
is it stylistically similar to this one? He says with as much charity as he possibly can.
Is it a deconstruction of the concept of storytelling, or is it a?
It's a 2015 novel, so he's still going at it.
He's still doing it.
This Kim guy. He's only 69 years old. He's not that old. I guess it. For some reason, I don't know. In my head, I just had this as a book from further ago than it actually was.
And I kept learning that it was from the early 90s and then forgetting it again.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I would have thoughts like, I wonder if like him and Frank Herbert were thinking about the idea of like Islam spreading throughout the. No, Frank Herbert was like way before this. Come on.
Yeah. Well, apparently Aurora is indeed a deconstruction of the concept of storytelling. But Kirk says it is more of a narrative, so I don't know. It's not like I love his prose, so I don't know. Maybe y'all can just send us a bunch of snippets to read a whole book. That's mean. Miss Evil Doom says, when I read it, I assumed it was from the 70s. Yeah, it has that feel to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, like when they're having the ritual.
Yeah.
Like the sex ritual and the nakedness ritual or whatever it is. I was like, this, this is Stranger in a Strange Land 70s shit again.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh wait, no, it's actually kind of inexplicable given the time.
I wonder if he's intentionally reaching back to that kind of storytelling. It feels like yes.
It does feel like yes. You could say that because a lot of there's a lot of the like steely-eyed missile man feel to Frank and John both, where it's like they do kind of feel like throwbacks to like Asimov protagonists in certain ways. Of course, wildly not at all in other ways.
Sure.
It's like he took the concept of an Asimov protagonist and then like deconstructed it into like, okay, but this is how these guys would really be actually on the inside.
Yeah, I think that's spot on for sure. Okay, anything else?
No, I think I'm good.
All right. Before we move on to next month, I thought we would just take a brief moment here and look back at this past year. Now, all these images are terribly low res because I had a much bigger plan to make a pretty image of all the books of the year, and then I ran out of time, so I just had to quickly copy images, and they're all low res and terrible, so apologies for that. But look, folks, this was 2021 in the book club. Here it is. So, Matt, what is your reaction to seeing this image? What do you think about the year in book club?
Well, generally speaking, I'm in constant disbelief about how many books that we've managed to read so far. It's funny. I went through this exercise recently of fairly meticulously like ranking all of the books that I've read recently. And even just looking at this list of 12, it's like some of these books didn't particularly care for in the end. And some of them I absolutely loved, and I still feel happy just seeing their cover. So overall, a ton of fun talking about all of them, regardless of whether I thought the book itself was great.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I always love the conversations for sure.
So how did you feel about 2021 in reading?
Looking at here, it's a mix. It's sure is a mixed bag, right? I think the interesting thing to me is that the year starts off real strong. Like, This Is How You Lose the Time War, The Ocean at the End of the Lane, and Reaper Man back to back. Bam, boom, boom, boom. 3 great books that I absolutely loved. And then and then we kind of lose our way for a little bit here. There's plenty to love in Ghost Story, but I was very mixed on that book overall.
Mhm.
Didn't really love Old Man's War. I think Foucault's Pendulum is probably one of my least favorite book club books ever. That made reading Red Mars seem like going to Disney World or something. Like yeah, that was rough. The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet was like the perfect palate cleanser to Foucault's Pendulum. I had a lot of fun with that, but not stupendous. Words of Radiance was the book that finally made me fall in love with Stormlight Archive, so I really enjoyed that. Gideon the Ninth was another book that I was fairly mixed on, and I've fully gone over to I love this book now after our conversation.
Yeah, I remember that one being delightful.
And then Ancillary Justice and 7.5 Deaths, both pretty mixed on. And then Red Mars, like it's like I would not say this was like a stupendous reading year for me. You know?
Yeah, it's funny. I think Gideon, Ancillary Justice, and 7.5 Deaths. I now remember more fondly. It's funny because how I felt about them immediately after reading them, how I felt about them during the conversation, and how I feel about them now are not necessarily going to match.
Sure.
But I have a lot of fond memories of those three in particular, and also about This Is How You Lose the Time War. I generally agreed with you, but it's funny how memory and hindsight and maybe going back and listening to those podcasts kind of shift my my recollection of how I felt about things.
Sure.
It's funny how your memory works, because what I find when I think back on a book that I read a while ago is like generally what happens is I will automatically, without even thinking about it, call up specific moments, images, scenes, character concepts, emotions primarily. And if I'm able to call up like a pleasant, positive, fun set of feelings, then I'll be like, oh yeah, I like that book.
Yeah.
In reality, I don't know if I like the book. I just my brain did this memory operation, and that's what it gave me, and that makes me think I must have liked it because I had some good memories while reading it.
Sure.
Anyway, it's a good. I'd say many of these books I actually loved, so I call that a success.
So, what was your favorite book of 2021?
Possibly Gideon the Ninth.
Wow.
After looking over this list.
Wow.
I have a guess for what I think yours is going to be, but
okay.
What is yours?
I'm really curious what your guess is.
I'll tell you.
No, because then I can change it. So let me tell you first.
You tell me first.
I think my favorite is The Ocean at the End of the Lane.
That's what I was going to say.
Damn it. Stop knowing me. Yeah, that's what I would say for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Well, that's what I thought, because I remember you just like loving that book, and I liked it a lot, but it did not hit me as hard as it hit you, but I definitely liked it a lot.
I love that book. It's so beautiful. Such a beautiful story. Loved it so much.
And yeah, it's
So what is your?
It's fun to think back over the.
What is your least favorite book of the year?
Probably. Well, I'm almost not even going to count Foucault's Pendulum.
Why not?
Because I only even read the abridged version, because that was.
I totally forgot that happened. That you read this whole conversation about me complaining about the length of this book and you being like, "Oh, I finished it in like a day."
Yeah, it's not that long. I think Old Man's War would be my second least favorite.
Old Man's War, I feel like, is a book that I'm gonna forget in like 5 years. Old Man's War and Ancillary Justice are two books that if you talk to me in 5 years, I probably could not tell you a single thing that happened in them, because I already kind of feel that happening right now. Old Man's War, I remember they were green people. Ancillary Justice, this was 3 months ago, and it's like she was an AI, she was a ship, and the Emperor was cloned or something.
Yeah, there's a clone emperor swarm.
Yeah,
bunch of emperors.
So yeah, I mean those two books, like that's I think I enjoyed the act of reading Old Man's War way more, but it also felt like I felt like that episode we were like struggling to come up with things to talk about because it just like it was a fun book, but I didn't feel like it had too much to say.
Yeah, that's one thing that you become really aware of the more of these you talk about is like
Hmm.
sometimes there's just not that much meat there,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you can generally find things to talk about, but that doesn't mean like sometimes the book is just so rich with ideas and character and depth that
Hmm.
there's an embarrassment of riches for you to choose from, and in some cases, like an Old Man's War, you're just like, uh is this a satire? I can't tell.
Yeah. Kirk says ancillary justice. She sings. Legitimately forgot that singing was a part of that book. You've reminded me now, but I would never have said that. Yeah. Um, I will always have a fond place in my heart for Reaper Man because that will always be the book that I read in the hospital waiting for my son to be born because there was literally March 22nd, 2021 when I finished that book. So we were waiting for my son to be born, which so that those two memories are always going to be tied together. So
Yeah, it's very
that's I
special.
love that book. Yeah.
Yeah.
My least I just think it's easy to say Foucault's Pendulum for least favorite, so I don't want to say it. And like, look, I enjoyed our conversation about that book a whole lot, so I don't know. I don't know. Um, I think it's like ancillary justice for me. Honestly, I
Mm.
think this we were talking about the last few months, Gideon, ancillary justice, and 7.5 Deaths. I think out of those three, I've grown to love Gideon since then. I've grown to I've loved reading 7.5 Deaths. I was really frustrated in our conversation with 7.5 Deaths, and a month later, I'm pretty content with it, and I'm like, oh, it's a pretty good book. Ancillary Justice, I think I've only grown colder to since we left it.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely would fail a quiz over the plot of Ancillary Justice, and I remember enjoying 7.5 Deaths a lot, but it just passed that threshold of being convoluted to the point where I finished it, I enjoyed it, but I was lost in a few places for sure.
Just needed one or two like less features of the time loop story in it,
Yeah,
and it would have been perfect. You know?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because part of it's funny. I actually think I learned something about myself because there was always this voice in my head prior to reading that book that said like I just want like a really obscenely convoluted and complicated time travel story, and then I got that and I was like,
No, you don't.
no, I don't. Yeah, I actually want just the right amount, no more, no less.
The anti-doof effect. I'm so sorry that happened, Kyrgyzstan. Although I think it seems like most people agree with that. That I like that book so much. I'll read more books by Stewart, but we haven't talked about Ghost Story very much, and I think that's probably because that's the one where I don't think anyone attended book club. That was my Scott Pickham, and no, it was just you and me
Yeah,
just posting up talking about Peter Straub's book. I'm sure there
and
were a couple other people, but I think it was our least attended by far.
I would definitely not put that at the very bottom of the list. I think it was just good, not great.
Yeah, yeah,
It was not bad or
yeah.
anything.
And I guess let's say one final note to Brando Sando. Thank you for writing a very good book that I shockingly enjoyed despite so many prologues.
Yeah. The funny thing about when I tried to determine my favorites is that the Brandon Sanderson books always fell really, really low, not because I don't like the Brandon Sanderson books that much, but because I can't remember what happens in which one, and thus I don't want to be like, did I like Words of Radiance more than um uh, Mistborn? It's like, well, I don't remember what happened in which book versus which book, so it's really hard to do the comparison.
Yeah. Kirk says I liked the long way to a small angry planet, but honestly don't know how much of an impression it left. I agree, which is why we haven't really talked about it at all, because I've just filed this away in my head as Firefly the book,
Yeah.
and look, loved Firefly, great show, good book, really enjoyed it, but yeah, it's just not going to be one of those ones that really sticks with you for a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like a short, compact, entertaining ride.
Hmm.
It did its job, and we're good.
Yeah,
I'm good with Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. I
yeah,
can't say that.
yeah.
Yeah,
That
it's
was
just
good.
a fun read.
So I mean, we got We got 12 more months to go. We got 12 more opportunities for great books. I hope that you will all be there for every single one of these books. And speaking of which, let's talk about January's book, Matt. Let's talk about it.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
So next month we are going to be reading Piranesi. Is that how you pronounce it?
Piran, I don't know.
Piranesi.
I don't know what language that's supposed to be.
I think
Piran-
in my head I always pronounce it Piranesi, but I'm pretty sure that's wrong. So I'm gonna say Piranesi.
I've never had to pronounce it in my head. I guess we should look this up before the end of next month, huh?
You want to know the pathetic thing is I did look it up before this episode because I knew I was gonna get here, and then I forgot since I looked it up. So I'll look it up again before next week. So this is the book written by Susanna Clarke, who you, Matt, will recognize as the author of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. So she wrote that book like 10 years ago and wrote nothing since. And Piranesi came out like the same month we covered Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell for the book club. So it was like kismet. Like we cover this book and suddenly she releases her first book in a decade. It's a short book. And I've actually, to be honest with you, I've read it already because we finished Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and I went out the next day and bought this book and read it. It's very short, not a very lengthy read. So, spoilers, it's pretty good. It's a pretty good book, and I think you're going to really like it. So, we will be meeting on Friday, January 28th. That's only 3 weeks from now, but I figured since the book was short, we could use that opportunity to kind of get back on our actually doing this on the last Friday of the month schedule that we kind of broke because of the holidays the last few months. But so 3 weeks from now, Friday, January 28th, we'll be read this book.
That's fantastic. I really, really love Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, so I'm excited about this one.
It's very different, and for those of you out there that like, oh, I haven't read Jonathan Strange, it's not in the same universe at all. It's nothing to do with it at all. It's completely own standalone story. So if you're curious about Susanna Clarke, but were daunted by the extreme length of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, this would be a great entry point to her type of writing. It's a good one. So we'll talk more about it. Something on my computer just made a noise and I don't know what it was. Something just got connected. I don't know what it was. Oh my God.
Well, I can still hear you.
That's good. But that is going to do it for us this month. Thank you everyone who tuned in live for this and all of the book clubs of last year. We continue to love doing this thing. It is so much fun, even when the books aren't that popular and not that many people show up. So thank you to all of our regulars and all of the new people out there. We hope you will continue to show up throughout the rest of this year.
That's right. And if you like what we do here at Doof Media and you want to see more of it, then consider heading on over to patreon.com/Doof Media and consider donating to support our organization. At any of the available reward tiers, you'll gain access to the ability to vote in this book club and help control which books we're going to talk about each month, as well as a bunch of other exclusive features. So go check that out.
That's right. And of course, if you have any questions, comments, or just want to reach out to us and say, hey, you can find us on Twitter at doofmedia.com, email us at doofmedia@gmail.com, or head over to our very own subreddit. That's r/doofmedia. We'll see you there, and we'll see everyone next month.
Good night.
We did it. So, okay, folks, I don't know if we're going to stick around for that long. Solely for the fact that I've literally had to blow my nose for the past hour and a half, and I've been slowly going insane. So, I mean, maybe I'll just like pop away real quick and blow my nose, and we can hang out for like 10 minutes. Can you entertain the people while I go blow my nose, Matt?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you say 10 minutes or?
Well, it is a very, very stuffed nose. So.
Wow.
No, a few seconds. I'll be right back.
Everybody. That was a fun discussion. I think as usual, I think I'm a bit warmer on it after the discussion than I was beforehand. Let's see. I'm excited about Piranesi. Piranesi. I had Google tell me how to say it. Let me do that again. Hold on a second, everyone. Piranesi is what Google says. It says it's the American pronunciation. Of what use is the American pronunciation for a word that's obviously not English? Piranesi. Shouldn't I want the Italian pronunciation if it's an Italian name? Anyway, um, well, Kirk, have you submitted that to the book club submission form? And if so, maybe I will go look it up and we can see about that. I don't remember that, but I haven't looked at the submission form in a little bit. So
Yeah, keep submitting stuff, folks. Hello, I'm back. And all my COVID is taken care of.
good.
I don't actually know if it's COVID.
Yeah,
It
I thought I
probably
had
is,
COVID
though.
last week, but it wasn't. So that's yeah.
I can't get a test because there are no tests anywhere, Matt. There are no tests anywhere.
Yep.
I tried to get an at-home test. I cannot find them anywhere. I did like a 50-mile radius search at every place I know that sells at-home tests. They're sold out everywhere. I tried to schedule a test. No free time slots
Oh my
anywhere.
God.
It's insane. It's insane right now.
That is horrible. Oh, yeah. Did I? We have a Kirk and a Kyrgyzstan. That's right. I guess I knew that in my brain, but
Mm-hmm.
it is confusing.
I do live in a. Do I live in a county that voted red? I don't know. No, because my representative is a Democrat. So, well, so we got an email today at 6 p.m. that someone in our son's daycare room tested positive for COVID, which means he's banned from daycare for 10 days. So all next week we're gonna have him home with me. I'm gonna go insane. I don't know what I'm gonna do. How am I gonna get any work done?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I don't have any answer for you.
So I don't know. We were supposed to go to New York City next weekend for our anniversary. I don't know if that's gonna happen now. We need to get tested and see. That's the thing. We need to get tested, but I can't find the tests.
Just can keep driving in greater and greater circles, like
That's true.
Frank Chalmers.
Yeah, just wander across the surface of Earth until
Mhm.
I find a testing site. Yeah.
Yeah. Plagued by guilt.
That's. I'm sorry about that, Doom. That must have been
I
rough.
I actually remember that. I remember being confused because people were saying Doom a whole lot, and I was like, "What happened? What's going on?" Oh, I get it.
Yeah, we have a lot of books in our submission thing that. So not when we actually pick them to put them to vote, it's half what we want to read and it's half what we think would actually do well in votes, and I'm frequently wrong about that because I really thought Lonesome Dove would get more traction than it did, and I think 3 people voted for it, and I think I was one of them. So
Uh-huh.
it won
Yeah, I bet I know who all those people were.
Pulitzer. It won the Pulitzer Prize, y'all. It's
Yeah, I
supposed
mean,
to be the best novel ever.
yeah, come on, please don't make me read Lonesome Dove on my own time.
God, it will be a very long book club book. Like that's like 1,000-pager. It's a Sando novel.
Oh no.
Oh, it got up to 5 votes. Okay, good. Well, good. I'm glad.
That's funny.
You're playing video games, aren't you? I hear the clicking.
No, I'm not playing video games quite yet.
Okay.
I'm probably gonna go to bed and not play video games.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna go to bed too. I think. Yeah, that's the thing is like, honestly, with a lot of these books, it's a popularity contest,
Yeah.
and like, in theory, the vote is supposed to be, would you be interested in reading this book? But most of the time, it shakes out to, have you read this book before, and did you like it? And that's how it usually works. So it's why Brandon Sanderson always does so well, because at least the crowd of people that we typically attract really likes those type of novels.
That's why the We Pick 'em months are important, because it's our opportunity to try to get everyone to read something um, possibly unpopular,
Yeah, and then no one shows up.
and then no one shows up.
House of Leaves was nominated, but yeah, I don't think we're ever going to cover that in this way. I just don't know how to do that. It's impossible. I love that book to death. I feel like I feel a reread coming on. It's one of those books that I reread every few years, and like it's starting to feel like I'm thinking to myself, I could reread that book right now, but I don't know how to do it. I don't know. I don't know how to do it.
Maybe get on that one.
You know what I would like to do? Maybe not for book club specifically, but I would like to read more books that come out in the year I'm living in, because like I always get to those year-end vote for your favorite books of 2021 thing, and I'm like, I've read 3 of these. That's like movies. I feel like I always watch a bunch of movies that came out in the year. I always watch a bunch of TV that came out in the year, but books, I feel like I'm always perpetually reading books from years ago.
Yeah, well, it's hard to do that. I mean, the closest you can get is maybe say you're going to read the most recent, Nebula, Hugo, whatever award winner.
Mm-hmm.
And at least then you'll be reading something that a lot of other people have read and are talking about. But even that, it's not, it's not guaranteed to be the book from that year that people remember for decades to come.
Yeah. Maybe going more dictatorial, up the We Pick 'em frequency. I don't think that would tank viewership too much. I just don't. I want to limit that as much as possible, because I know people really like voting for stuff and they get excited. So I don't want to take that away from too many people. I mean, the problem, and the game club guys experience this on their end as well. Like, it's a lot easier to vote in a poll than it is to like read the book and show up to book club. So like, there's people that vote that never attend or never listen. They're just like, oh, I like this book, click. And it's like, because it's an easy thing for them. And it's not that I want to take that away, but I wish there was a way to like weight the participants' votes higher,
Yeah. Maybe we should put some effort into figuring out a method for that. Like we could potentially even say, like, at the end of this conversation, we stop the recording, and then we get everyone who's actually here to make a vote for next month from a list, which and then their votes count for like 5 votes or something. I don't know. Just a thought.
Yeah,
that would require us to actually formulate our list a full month earlier than we usually do. But
sure, I don't dislike that. I think it does give, like, if there's a regular that can't make a particular month, they lose out on that. Which, I mean, I guess that's not too much of a concern. I don't think they'd care too much, But I don't know. Oligarchy not to take. Yeah, I should be part of the elite book club voting. Yeah, I think there's a way to do this better, for sure. And I think we've gotten, we've been doing this for a while now, book club, and it's never like grown to be huge. I think it's like the smallest thing we do relative, but it's also one of the most favorite things we do. So we're never going to stop doing it just because there's not like 300 people showing up to everyone or whatever. Yeah. But I think there are ways of making it better, and so we're definitely thinking about those. So yeah, I think maybe doing this kind of, and I think the game club guys talked about that. I don't know why I keep seeing Ruben and Elliot talked about doing a thing where the people that attended game club got maybe not like 100% of the vote, but just like a more heavily weighted portion of the vote. Yeah, let us think about that over the next month, and maybe we'll bring something.
Yeah. We need a new political order just to suit our reality. Yeah, as John would say.
Yes. The other We Pick 'em book was Ancillary Justice. That's what Matt picked.
So I did.
Which I thought was a waste, because that was a book that performed very well in the previous polls and would have won eventually, but that's what Matt picks.
It was a waste. I won't get to pick again for forever.
A year.
What a waste. So angry. So mad.
Kyrgyzstan, that's fine. I was not the people I was, not even chastising but commenting on was just like people that don't ever show up, don't do any part of it, but just like see a poll and click, right. Which, I mean, it's fine. Like, we're inviting them to do that. It's fine if people want to do that, but I was just I wish there was a way to weight the people that show up more. So we'll figure something
Yeah.
out. For
Or
sure.
I mean, another way of saying is I wish there was a way to actually incentivize people to show up instead of what
Yeah.
happens by default.
What if we gave everyone $5? Wait, no, we want them to do that. Reverse that. No, yeah. I mean, that's a good point. That's a good point. I don't know.
All right, everybody, I have to go.
Yeah, I'm going to go as well. I can't. My nose is all stuffy. So, all right, folks. Thanks again for hanging out, and hope to see you in a few weeks to read Piranesi, which, if you haven't read it, man, it's a fun little book. I think you're all going to really, really enjoy it. And I think there's going to be a lot to talk about, so make sure you come out next week, next month, next whatever, but 3 weeks from now, whatever it is.
Can't wait.
All right. Later,
Good night.
folks. Good night. Thanks again.